Our recording has begun, and at 12:31, I am calling the December meeting of Senate to order. Our first order of business, where are we? Our first order of business is to approve the meeting agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Well, Mark Molesky here. I would like to add an agenda item to old business to further discuss APP.
Okay, hold on just a second. APP, all right. Alan?
Thanks, Al. It wasn't on the agenda, but it was included in the documents to review, and that was the FAC resolution regarding tuition increases. Did the committee decide not to put that on the agenda, or is that an oversight?
I can be more explicit. So it wasn't clear to me what order or how many of the resolutions that were put forward we were going to discuss, Alan. So we have we have the Senate draft resolution that Crystal and Felicia and I worked on, and then we have the FAC resolution. So let me make some distinctions there.
Sure. They look pretty similar, actually. So,
well, what we did was we took all of the, well, probably not all, but a number of different resolutions that had been floating around, and we consolidated some of the most poignant points into a Senate. But let me make those distinctions.
okay, so that's under number 9 resolutions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So I just added those and made those distinctions. Asantwa and then Roberta. Asantwa, is your hand still up? For some reason, I'm not seeing hands today.
No, my hand's not up, sorry.
Okay. Roberta.
I just wanted to clarify for folks that the piece about the student handbook is with reference to grade appeals. That one document. Thank you.
And that's on the agenda, isn't it, Roberta?
Yes, it is.
It is. Okay.
Yep.
Are there any other edits to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the agenda as amended?
This is Roberta. I'll move to accept the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Roberta. Are there any objections? Are there any objections? Okay, we have an agenda. Moving on to the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes. This is Roberta.
Thank you, Roberta. Are there any changes? Any discussion?
Yes, one minor correction in 6B, CFO Kelly, Kelley.
Was that Mark?
Yes, that's Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Any other edits?
This is Roberta. Number 3, letter B-I, that should be asked with a D.
Okay, thank you. Any additional edits?
Is there a second? I'm not sure if there was a second, Al.
There isn't a second, but we also made changes after Roberta's motion, so.
That's fine.
Okay. Alan, is that a second?
Yes, I second the amended,
The amended changes.
the motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Minutes as amended. Thank you very much. All those in favor? All those in favor? John, please let me know if it's unanimous.
We have a Merdad.
Merdad? Merdad?
Is doesn't have senator in front of his name.
Yeah, I'm trying to look to see how I can change it. I haven't been successful in doing it.
I'll do that for you right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I count 27.
27. Okay, thank you.
Hold on one sec. 26. Oh, okay. That's what I counted.
Okay,
I just want to make sure.
go ahead and lower your hands, folks. All those opposed to accepting the minutes as amended? All those opposed? None opposed? Abstentions? Any abstentions? No abstentions. The motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving along. So thank you folks for attending today's meeting. We have a fair amount of work ahead of us and we have some changes to the agenda. So that will require us to be thoughtful and a little more agile as we consider those discussions that were just added to the agenda. I do have an update and it's not going to be very satisfactory, I'm afraid. But we do have an update that Connecticut State has agreed to the framework that we proposed for additional release. Now, the good news is that it more than doubles the hours that were initially offered for service on statewide, on statewide Senate. It more than doubles the initial. I say it's not satisfying because we just received their agreement last night and it hasn't been formalized. They've just acknowledged last evening that they recognize the additional work that we are doing and they want to support that work. The piece that's not satisfying is that means that we haven't had a chance to move those numbers into a table and share that with you. Although you are aware of the original framework, we did share that with you. It actually increased, I believe, by an hour and a half, even since we shared that with you. So it is good news that we have reached agreement and we should have that table out, I think by early February. So that information will be forthcoming. Bonnie?
Any possibilities of you being able to share that with us now?
No, I really can't, Bonnie. It was just an email that said that they were working with us, and I do not have. It was a it's a Word document that just went back and forth.
So can I also ask, is that going to be also, because we're already hitting a year in compensation that we have not received, is that going to take into account this whole year that we have not been compensated for?
So there were a lot of questions CT State had about folks not being compensated for spring 2023. And that is an unresolved issue, and spring 2023 is by the original recommended release. What we have done is advocate for more than twice that amount of release, and it will be retroactive to fall 2023. So it's actually it's better, right? Because the spring 2023 had a lower rate because there was less work expected. We were doing so much more beginning fall. We do, however, expect you to be able to use the tables once they're finalized to be able to apply them with your deans. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. President Maduko.
Yeah, real quickly, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I think it's really important that for any members of the College Senate who feel that they have not been compensated for previous governance duties, specifically to spring of 23, that they bring that to the attention, obviously, of L, but to include Diane Mazza and HR Shared Services and your respective deans, so that can be rectified. So I want to make sure and have all you hear from me. If you feel like, hey, Maduka, I've yet to be compensated for what I've done in the past, and let's make sure that we address that, so that's not lingering into the new year. And then in terms of L, I think in terms of the table being made available in early February, let's be more aggressive. Let's make that table available in January, right? So that, again, any details that need to be ironed out, something's off, let's address that prior to this group obviously resuming their governance work in the new year.
Thank you. I don't know whose hand went up first. I see Bonnie and Alan. So Bonnie and then Alan.
Bonnie was first.
Okay.
Thank you, Alan. President Maduko, I think part of the lack of compensation is due to lack of clarity and communication, which does not allow our deans to make the decisions in regards to how best to compensate us. So I know that specifically for our campus, our dean was waiting to hear back in regards to what this body was going to be made the decision. So that way, whether it be compensation in our timesheet, because there's not a code for it, right, in regards to that. So how is it that going to be taken care of? And so at least if we have that clarity in regards to, yes, we can be compensated in this form, then I think our deans and supervisors are more apt to go ahead and do that. And so I think that's where my question arises in regards to, is that something that has been approved? Because I also heard Elle say it was recommended, right, that spring 23 be also considered, not just for fall of 23. So I think that kind of communication, if we can get that out to our deans and supervisors, I think that would be extremely helpful.
Will do. Thank you.
And Bonnie, that is what this negotiation this semester sought to clarify, is actually establish equitable and not recommendations, but this is the release. Alan?
Thanks. I guess my question is somewhat related in terms of understanding when, I know there's some complications with staff who may be receiving release time as opposed to being compensated monetarily, but where there's clear understanding of when we get our paycheck, when we're paid for, say, winter session, summer session courses, things like that. Is there clarity as to when this compensation will be paid? Is it at the end of the semester? Is it, it would be nice to have some clarity around that so we'd know what to expect. And I guess that's sort of my open-ended question. Thank you.
No, I agree. I think, Alan, selfishly, I want clarity too, right? So again, now we pass the baton to HR Shared Services and Payroll Shared Services for them to do their work, because no two senators are even in the same situation in terms of their, not governance duties, but like their day job in terms of the faculty piece, the staff piece. And I think that's the piece that needs to be ironed out by each individual senator in respect to their respective dean or CEO, in respect to the college and HR shared services. So like those are the technical details that need to be ironed out, that need to also be shared with this group, supervisors and whomever. So that's in progress. But in terms of just in principle agreeing to that there has to be compensation for the elected senators of this group, I agree. Obviously the officers, obviously the committee chairs. Because I think I told someone I wouldn't do this for free. Yeah, you have your bleep in mind. I wouldn't do this. So you guys are better people than me. So we're gonna iron that piece out. And then again, I think, to me, there's a part of me that suspects that it's not just for the college senate. There just might be any employee that might have the question, like, where do I go for the breakdown of X? Just to know what this looks like that I can refer to without having to email or send something in. I think that's an area of a point of frustration for both manager and employee. That's something that we need to work on. But HR shared services and payroll, they've been made privy to our decision, our stance, our agreement, and now that's where the real work begins. So we'll push it. We'll push it on our end to make sure that there's information, and then you guys do what you do and scrutinize what's there. So if there's omissions or mistakes, let's get that rectified as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
As soon as we have something to share, we will. We just don't have that yet. Okay. And that's the dissatisfying part. The good news is we did make some progress. It was very late in the game, but we just don't have something to share yet. That's forthcoming. The other thing that I want to point to as we recognize that we are hopefully coming to agreement on release is that as we take this break, I hope that everyone will take some time to reflect and really think about, is statewide governance serving the needs of our college and our students? And I think that we need to look carefully at how the structure has been created. I was very interested, President Meduco, in reading your post and looking at the idea or thinking about the idea of stabilizing. And part of what we need in governance is to be more effective and efficient. But we also need clear areas of responsibility. And I fear that in the original creation of governance, it sought to really divide things up. It gave some things to curriculum and some things to Senate, but it wasn't always clear. And one of the things that is sometimes used to question whether or not the right group, I put that in air quotes, is addressing a problem is by saying, well, do you have the purview to do that? And I think that is a problem that we need to address. And that's not going to be an easy one. So as you are taking some time and we are coming back together in late January, I hope that that is something that you will be reflective on and you are able to provide some additional feedback as we look to moving into the beginning of our second year. So with that, I want to thank all of you for the incredible work that you have done. You took on this work hoping that we would be effective and efficient, and we are certainly working towards that, but we have a long way to go. But there is really no question that it is the collaboration that we do together that we try to better understand the impact of our actions or the impact of policies and procedures. And we try to improve those. That is how we are going to make Connecticut State a better place to work and a better place for our students to learn. So with that, I just want to thank you very much for all the work that you've done this last year. And President Meduco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Vandermark. I'm getting text messages from Provost Brown and CEO Karen Hynek. They're having issues logging in. So is there a way that maybe we can resend them the link or give them?
Karen is here.
See Karen. So what? Let me take.
Karen. Let me see if I can.
Provost Brown is having trouble, so
Okay.
we'll
Okay.
send him a link again and see what we can do to help get him in.
Okay.
Yep.
Sweet. Awesome. So happy holidays, everyone. I'll say this so you don't have to say it. Thank God we've reached the end of this calendar year, right? It has been it's been one for the record books. I think since August I've been telling people, can we just get out of this year? Right? So yes, I've been counting the days, and it's really due to the sheer effort and will on your part, and obviously on the parts of our colleagues, faculty, and staff and leaders across our college and campuses and other locations, to not only will CT State to existence and to stand up the college, but to really put out the litany of fires that have taken place throughout this semester and that remain and that will go into the new year. But nonetheless, at no point have I felt that our great faculty and staff have failed to prioritize the needs and the education and the development of our students. So I really want to commend you for that. We are 4 months and 22 days old. And I on an hourly basis, I have to remind people of that, so that we do a better job giving grace to ourselves, but also they kind of push back on people outside of the college when they're saying, well, what about this? What about that? Hey, we just got here. We've just been birthed and we're crawling right now and it's painful. As we go into the new year, it's important for us to kind of reflect and to refresh and recharge, and obviously to prepare for what I anticipate is going to be a colorful spring semester, as it relates to our funding and our budget and the concerns, understandably, that a lot of our folks have, not only with the college, but I think just the landscape of public higher education in the state of Connecticut, and we're seeing this even nationally. What I will ask all of you, because I've talked to a handful of you, and you've told me, hey, this Senate thing is not, sometimes it's not fun. There is a lot of work that we're doing, and we have to figure out a way. And I have to lean on your counsel and your wisdom to better activate and engage our college community, right? Where maybe it's initiate standing committees per the president's office where it's voluntary and people are contributing to what should be the strategy for enrollment management, what should be the strategy as it relates to student success and retention, what should be the strategy for other areas, right? So that you don't feel like you guys are carrying the institution to this place of stability, right? Because I can't do it by myself. And as great as you are, as college senators, you guys can't do it by yourselves, right? So we need the collective, right? We need a coalition of the willing. As it relates to what lies ahead, there's a lot, right? There's a lot. There's advocacy for our funding that I wholeheartedly agree. We need to be fully funded and recognized for all the things that we do inside and outside the classroom. I think we have to continue and jointly and in partnership write our story. What type of college are we trying to be? Like what does that mean? Especially in a higher ed landscape where, again, and hopefully we're not being dismissive of this, our colleagues in other states cannot say the word diversity or their tenure is being pulled, right? They are losing their jobs or campuses or institutions, they're losing their funding. That is literally taking place, right? Like we are seeing that in this century, in this country. So what does that mean for higher ed? Is this a movement that's spreading? I think that's a bad thing. So what do we need to do as advocates of freedom of speech and academic freedom and the freedom of our students to have the right to learn the way they see fit, right? So there's a lot going on, and our sector is on fire. And people are exhausted, and if not fed up, they're frustrated with what's going on, right? So we need our faculty and staff even more so to be vocal what's going on, not only locally, but nationally. As it relates to leadership, I recognize and I thank you for bringing things to my attention. I recognize this. We are far from perfect. We are far from great. And if things fundamentally that we have to fix, and hopefully the college administration, hopefully we've demonstrated our willingness to listen and our willingness to say, okay, that thing doesn't work. Why we thought it was going to work, it doesn't. Okay, let's go back to the drawing board in partnership with all of you. And that's how we're going to get the stability. right? The majority of stuff that makes up CT State's not in stone. It's not, right? Because at the end of the day, I just want things to work for our faculty, work for our staff, work for our students, and also factor in the nuances between a Norwalk and a Naugatuck Valley and a Northwestern, right? Because there's differences in terms of community and region. That's really important. But I will hang my hat on, I believe that we have the best mission and values of any institution of higher education in the state of Connecticut. I think we do. I think we genuinely serve the state. We're not selective. We don't turn people away. Other institutions in this state cannot say that, and we know it. So I think we have a greater responsibility to the people who have needs, and we're seeing that right now, and people are in pain. So we got to figure that out. Last but not least, I really want to thank Elle Vandermark. Elle, you're not in like being a college senator. It's not a college senate president is not an easy position, right? So I commend the work that you're doing, and I commend her. She will call me out on certain things. She'll call me out on a lot of things. So I respect her candor, and I respect her willingness to advocate for all of you, which she does, right? She definitely has done that since we came in contact with each other, and I'm confident she will continue to do that. I ask of all of you, not for your trust, because trust is earned, but I ask for all of you to continue to put our students at the center of our work, right? As we strive for a better place, and that our values, our mission is what's going to make a difference in this state. So again, happy holidays. I thank you. For those of you who are off contract, please throw your laptops in the ocean and just relax and do what you do. Those of you who are not, when you are taking time off, just relax and recover. And Lord willing, 2024 will demonstrate hopefully better times and brighter times and some hope and opportunities for a better year. So again, I appreciate all of you. And again, if you need me, if there's something going on, you can reach out to me. I will meet with anyone at any place at any time for your needs, because I serve you and I serve everyone within CT State. So thank you.
If it's a state issued laptop, please don't throw it in the ocean. Set it aside.
In a shallow pond. Is that better? Right? I think they're waterproof, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, goodness. CEO Heineck, has the provost been able to join? I did resend, and
I do think Provost Brown is on. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any questions for President Meduco before we move on to our next agenda item? John.
Just a quick question. We received word at Northwestern that we were on a budget freeze, except for I don't remember what the phrase was specifically, but I was just wondering when that came out, is that across all campuses, or does that just happen to be for our campus?
That might be locally. Let me circle back with Dr. Rook. I have refrained from using the word freeze because we have vacancies, and we have staffing needs that are not only necessary but often are different by campus. And I think when you say freeze, there is a chilling effect. So I've refrained to do that. But let me be fair to Dr. Rook and make sure. But from a college standpoint, we have not put out an edict or a directive that there is a hiring freeze or a budget freeze. We're continuing to mitigate our budget to the best of our ability.
Thank you for that clarification. And with that, we're going to move on to the next item, which is CEO Heineck and Provost Brown on early college and dual enrollment. I did share a couple of articles with you that they shared, or that were shared at the Leadership Council on this, and those are in our shared governance folder. So Provost Brown and CEO Heineck, thank you for coming to Senate.
Well, thank you for having us at Senate, and we appreciate the opportunity to begin a conversation here around dual enrollment in early college. As many of you know, the state of Connecticut has been doing dual enrollment to early college for over 40 years. But interestingly enough, as I'm sure you've heard President Meduco talk at a number of his meetings about the importance of dual enrollment and early college for our enrollment, Connecticut is further behind other states in the country around building bridges with high schools. Although we have a number of models, everything ranging from P-TECH to middle colleges, to Gateway to College, to CCP, to high school partnership. When we look at the overall enrollment of CT State with dual enrolled students, it's about 3% of our student enrollment. Nationally, we know that at many community colleges across the country, it ranges from between 20% of the total enrollment to up to 40%. And that 70% of the work that's done in the community college done in dual enrollment is done in the community college sector. So this is an area where we think as we've become one college, there's real opportunity for growth, but we wanted to come here to begin that conversation. I think the two articles that Al forwarded to you guys, one is in NECHI standards around dual enrollment. And when you read through that particular article, what you realize is that how we treat one student is how we have to treat another student. We have to have similar experiences. And that's one of the issues we know policy-wise we're struggling with dual enrollment. What I mean by that is with high school partnership. High school partnership is the ability for an 11th or 12th grader who graduates from or who's enrolled in a current Connecticut high school that's a public school to take up to 2 courses tuition-free fall and spring semester. CCP is concurrent enrollment. That's where the high school teacher is teaching the course on the high school campus. We have students in 9th and 10th grade accessing. You can see that that right there is not an equitable situation. That's where we need to make some policy changes. In addition to that, we know that students who go through dual enrollment are much more likely to graduate from high school, go directly on to college from high school, and go directly on to graduating with a certificate or a degree. We know that it has a huge economic impact for their students and their families for generations to come, because once students become students, their younger brothers and sisters also see themselves as college students. So what we're hoping to do today is have a little bit of dialogue around policy language and how we work together with you to revise some of the policies and procedures around dual enrollment. Provost Brown, I think you're on the call. Would you like to talk a little bit about
good afternoon.
MOUs and policy?
Yes, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me, CEO Heineck?
We are. Thank you, Provost Brown.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. And, you know, I'm excited about the work ahead. This is a great opportunity for us as a comprehensive institution. As CEO Heineck has laid out, the history of dual enrollment is rich in the state of Connecticut. As we have worked together during my time here and listening to the insights of President Baduco and CEO Heineck and others, and some of the experiences that many of us bring to the table, we understand that we have some opportunities to really work internally to partner in producing the best policies for recommendation, so that we can really help ensure that our concurrent enrollment, dual enrollment opportunities are in alignment across the board for our campuses and our K-12 partners. So that will be important. Some of the things that we are looking forward to focusing on, and we welcome feedback, but as it's tied to literature and even best and promising practices, teacher credentialing, also admissions criteria, and the differences between where we are with CCP and high school or HSP. Some of the things that we believe would benefit us to look at, and we welcome additional feedback as we go through the work ahead. Age, grade level, percentiles in classes, and making sure that the work is truly reflective of producing equitable outcomes for all students that we look to serve, whether it may be Black or brown students, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and also the academic middle. I will share with you really quickly that in my previous stage, there was some good work done there, and this is really an engine for changing the lives of students at a very young age. And I think as we go through and think through the policies that need to be recommended and procedures that need to be put into place, we definitely need to think in a forward manner so that we put our students in position to succeed through our dual enrollment opportunities. And so the other piece I want to make sure that I cover really quickly, and then I'll turn it back over to CEO Heineck, is that, we want to make sure that we keep in mind everything that NETCHI says about dual enrollment and from their standards and how they should be put into place to, again, impact student success, to make sure that we have the proper pathways set into place as well. And so, again, looking forward to the work ahead. We definitely have plenty to do, but we do it in the name of making impact for our younger students that will soon be CT State students through our dual enrollment opportunities. CEO Heineck.
Yeah, as Provost Brown mentions, I think what's important for us to remember is within our data, we have about 2,000 students that are coming to us being taught on our campus or online by our faculty through dual enrollment through high school partnership. And we do the bulk of our work in this area in something called CCP, coming out of the Perkins grant, which was really more like concurrent enrollment, and about 4,000 students in that area. But what we're really doing dual enrollment for is not only to give students an opportunity to get earlier exposure to college and a sense of belonging as a college student, but it's also about helping to get more students to matriculate to us. So how do we build the infrastructure to ensuring that students get a sense of belonging as a CT State student, see themselves once they've taken courses with us in high school to wanting to continue their education with us and knowing that that's an opportunity? And how do we connect them also to PACT? Because for a lot of students, they're not aware of that option. So that's part of the reason why we're here today, trying to help make sure that you guys are aware of the work that's being done and to seek partnership with shared governance as we launch a new council. One of the councils that President Madugo is asking us to launch is one that focuses on early college and dual enrollment so that we can gain the input of faculty and staff in addition to administration. So that new early college council will launch sometime in January, and we will have representation across all stakeholder groups as well as across all of our legacy campuses. In addition to that, President Madugo has asked me to work with him on an external group that we are also listening to the districts and what they need. So we are working with an executive council of K-12 administrators who are meeting with us quarterly too, to help us also learn what their needs are and how we can better serve their students and their districts. To give you an example, and I know that across our state, there are many different examples of how we're partnering with our districts, but I'll use mine in the quiet northeast corner. Killingly High School, struggling to find Spanish instructors. Very hard to find in this region. They're doing their Spanish courses on our campus taught by our faculty. But we're also recognizing that it's not just about teaching of the courses, and that obviously is central to the work we do, but it's also about connecting students to our campus so they have a sense of belonging. And that's the aspect that we also need to be thinking about in policy and in procedure, making sure students know that they can access our library, that they can access our other services, including our disabilities office. Those aspects have to be embedded in the work that we do around policy and procedure and how this impacts ACME policy and other areas as well. I wonder, Provost Brown, if it would be helpful if we took a few questions. I don't know if anyone has any questions on this.
Yes, we have some hands up already, Karen.
Great.
We're going to start with Nicola and then go to Sarah.
Hi, thank you for coming today. One question I have for you is there draft policy change language that you would be able to share with this body? I know the policies that Dr. Brown spoke about, or Provost Brown spoke about for changing, but I was just wondering if there's any draft language as of yet. Thank you.
So there was a committee that met last year, more of a leadership group that met last year that gave recommendations to President Madugo. I'm happy to share that language with this group, but it probably isn't ready to go until we move forward with a more inclusive process of having faculty and staff at the table. I will share that draft recommendation language with Elle, and I'm sure that she'll distribute it, right, Elle, if that's okay with you. And then as we work through the task force, we'll come back with the draft policy language. But there are definitely areas around teacher credentialing that need to be looked at. Admission age needs to be looked at. The ACME policy needs to be looked at. Those aspects obviously are touching the work that you guys do. And I'm sure there are aspects we haven't even thought about that need to be addressed, as well as funding. Many of you are aware that currently we are not receiving funding for this work. With concurrent enrollment in CCP, we do not charge, where UConn and other institutions do charge. And we also do not charge for high school partnership. But at the same point in time, we don't have any procedure around a full class of students who are high school students, which sometimes districts are looking for. Thank you for the question.
Sarah?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment because in the summer, I worked with Naugatuck Valley's Gear Up program to teach Intro to Human Services for sophomores going into junior year. And I had expressed some concerns. I'm like, I don't know maturity wise, social emotionally, like if they're ready. And I will say, and just from my pocket of experience, I was blown away with the amount. We met 3 hours, like close to 3 hours, 3 times a week, and their dedication and their grappling with the topics and processing human services. It was just amazing to work with them. I know, so part of this, and I've worked on other committees on the staff side previously, is that getting them to take the CCS 1001. And because I was familiar with high school to college, I embedded that in my first week conversation with them. And it was a very focused classroom of high school. But I know because it's now required in our degree programs, I don't know if this is something that we can first class, even if they just want to take English, they have to take the CCS 1001. It just, I do feel like all the things you're saying is like, how do you navigate the campus when you need it is just so critical. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Sarah, for your wise counsel. I agree 100% with the 10th graders. Oftentimes, you find that your high school students are very engaged. They're active, they want to learn. And oftentimes, data shows that high school students who are dual enrolled oftentimes at least meet, if not exceed, success rates of our traditional students. I also agree with you, having built early colleges in other states, the importance of that first year experience course in the building blocks of how we engage students, make sure that they have a strong on-ramp into the college and get a chance to know how to navigate our services and Blackboard and those types of aspects as well. So thank you. I think it's important. That's why we want to hear faculty and staff input as we're building and designing. That's the beauty of being a new college. As a new college, we can re-envision what we're doing based on best practice.
I believe next was Stephen and then Seth.
The other way around, Seth and Stephen.
Seth and then Stephen. Seth, you're up.
Thank you, Al. So a couple questions. The first question is about when right now for CCP students and or high school partnership, does that when we have our CCP students, Prosper Pathways, does that count toward our enrollment that we report? Because I was under the impression historically it didn't. Like that was a separate enrollment that didn't count when we report out our fall 24 enrollment. For the sake of argument, right now, do we include CCP as part of that enrollment data, for our freeze data, et cetera, both college career pathways and high school partnership? That's my first question.
It's a great question, Seth. And the answer to that is concurrent enrollment CCP, because it's taught at the high school by a high school faculty person who is not technically our employee, does not count towards our enrollment numbers. However, high school partnership that is taught on our campus does, or online or through hybrid, or if our faculty goes to their high school, that is counted towards our enrollment numbers.
Seth, do you have a follow-up?
So is that part of the, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the goal for college in other states, isn't the college career pathway or dual enrollment model, it does count toward, or is that consistent with other states?
In having been in other states, Seth, because it's about who is the supervisor of the person and where it actually comes as far as the location, other states, it's the same way. If it's taught by your faculty on your campus or online and it's your employee, it does count as enrollment in your enrollment numbers. If it's dual enrollment where it's at the high school taught by the high school teacher, it does not count towards our enrollment numbers. At the same point, we're obviously serving these students. So I do think it's important for us to make sure that whatever we're doing, and I would say there are obviously qualified people at the high schools who teach, many of whom are also adjunct teachers for us in the evening or through online. But the biggest piece that we need to be thinking about is how do we get those students on campus? How do we get them a sense of belonging as a CT state student? Because sometimes that's missed. Thank you, Seth. I don't know if you have a follow-up question.
And just thank you. And the second question was, could you just share more about the model with Killingley High School? And you said that our faculty are teaching the high school classes?
It's not the high school class. They're teaching our Spanish 1 and Spanish 2, or our Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 classes. They're teaching the college classes on the college campus, in which it's a hybrid model. Some of the class has been done through like an Elron piece, and some of it's physically been on our campus. So the benefit of that is that our faculty teaching the class, the students still had to meet the same requirements as any other student taking the course, but the students were physically on our campus, so they got connected to advising, career services. They know where our disabilities and accessibilities office is. They actually see themselves as college students. That's the difference that we're trying to create too, in doing more of that versus solely doing more on the concurrent enrollment side, where the students taking the courses at the high school and not getting connected to us, instead seeing themselves solely as a high school student, not necessarily knowing where they're getting the college credit from. Does that help?
That does. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seth.
And next, Stephen.
Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. This may just come from a lack of understanding, but so if our numbers are sitting at about 3% for the high school partnership, and we want to take that about to like 15 or even high as 40, I don't know what the exact measure we're going for is. From an advising standpoint, does this advising get put onto the backs of GPAs, or does this advising get, or I guess early days in plans, like, is there going to be other departments or other people that are looking to take on the extra enrollment of what these students have? Because it already feels like the caseload that I have of like 350 feels extremely high. And if it gets to the point where we're up to 15 or 40, I don't even know how to advise for that anymore.
I mean, I think you make a good point. The reality is, if you had a chance to look at the NECHI document, the NECHI document basically says for accreditation, if a student is a student is a student. So even if they're dual enrolled at the high school, they should have ability to have access to all our services, including advising and tutoring. I do think that there's a lot of benefits to our advisors. Obviously, you guys are subject matter experts in dual and guided pathway advising. You understand transfer in a way that sometimes a high school faculty member who's a counselor may not understand how transfer fully works between 2 and 4 year. So we have to think that process through. That's part of the reason why we're trying to get this council together, to hear those concerns, and also remember that we're going to need some funding in order to actually make scale happen, because it can't happen for nothing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Miguel and then Bonnie.
Yeah, thank you, Elle. And this may be putting the cart before the horse a little bit, but I wanted to just mention at the outset, we here at Gateway, we had a visit from Secretary Cardona's wife, who brought students from Meriden Public Schools, and I thought it was a successful event. And I bring this up specifically because of what you said, Karen, regarding a sense of belonging. Because the students, after they sort of got over their initial, this is a big building and all of that, and we did breakout rooms with live demos. We took them to the engineering, and they were able to build a circuit and things like this. And they really responded to that. And but one of the things they also responded to was the fact that we had translators available. We had Spanish language folks lined up ahead of time because so many students in that population spoke Spanish.
Yep.
They were very appreciative of that. And in the work in the classrooms where we were doing the breakouts, we were able to do simultaneous translation as needed. So I bring this up because I think that as we move into an implementation phase and trying to do that, I think it's important to recognize that the types of materials we're going to be using, publicity materials, marketing materials, right, need to be a little bit different. And we also need to incorporate the fact that we need to be very careful not to use college jargon. You're going to be taking a 3-credit course. I don't know what a college credit is if I'm a high school student, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we need to be very deliberate and very purposeful in the materials that we create and develop, because they need to be modified. It can't be the standard, the standard piece. The last piece I'll just say on this, I think that in terms of that marketing outreach and how do we create that sense of belonging, how do we attach students to a campus? We do that by bringing them here, right? By bringing them to our campuses and being able to talk to faculty and do demos and talk to students and talk to staff and make it real for them. Because the sooner you can make it a reality, not just an abstract, it becomes more concrete, obviously, but it also becomes more of a possibility, I think. So I know that's sort of putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because we're still sort of in way before that. But I want to mention that just because it's fresh in my mind, based off of that visit from Secretary Cardona's wife and the students and staff from Meriden Public Schools. Thanks.
Yeah, I really appreciate the feedback and couldn't agree more with you about the need for our marketing materials to reflect the student audience, as well as the translation needs. It's also about engaging families early. That has to be part of whatever our implementation process is.
That's right. And parents, I'm sorry to interrupt. Parents were actually invited to this as well. We did have a few parents. And we actually did a separate breakout room just for parents, A, so the students could have some downtime just with faculty and staff, and B, so the parents could have some downtime with faculty and staff, so they could ask questions that the respective groups didn't necessarily want the other group to hear at that moment.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Bonnie, then Peter and Roberta.
Thank you, Miguel, for bringing that up, because I think intentionality in regards to our languages differences does make a huge difference, especially in our marketing. And not only that, it needs to be so intentional that it's not the night of or the day of that you're looking for translators. Unfortunately, I get tagged on that. And so I want to make that point even more ardent. But the other thing we need to think about, we do have some partnerships, high school partnerships at Asnuntuck. And what I have learned in partnering with some of the leadership is that we do semi-onboarding. And I really think we need to think about the whole onboarding. So when you're thinking about a council, ensuring that IT and our enrollment and our GPAs are included in that, and somebody from Blackboard team, just because They get an ID, a semi-ID doesn't mean that they have access to all of our services online. Yes, they can walk into tutoring and GPA and go into the library, but when they start beginning their coursework, we've noticed a huge disconnect, and we're manually creating courses for these students and these classes so that they can have a true live experience. Manual courses do not reflect in immediate accessibility to our students in that aspect. So I think holistically, we need to be looking at that and ensuring that everybody who's at the table has a role that really is going to be sensitive to the needs of the students when we're talking about that. I think that's extremely critical, from their ID to the doors that they walk into in a building, but also Office 365 and SharePoint and all that comes with the dashboard for students coming in, because that is truly right now a huge disconnect. So something to think about.
Absolutely. And I love your idea about orientation. In other states that I've worked in, it's mandatory that students have orientation and dual enrollment, and it's specific to those students, including the families coming. So those are things that we can talk about in this task force to suggest to this council and the Senate group as we move forward with policy and procedure revision. So thank you.
Peter and then Roberta.
Hi, Karen. I saw you this morning.
Hi, Peter.
You again?
Nice to see you.
It's all good. I just want to mention, and maybe it's assumed in this external counsel you're talking about, but I clearly see a constituency of the high school guidance counselors is being absolutely critical to this, being part of the solution and really helping kind of the multiplier effect from the marketing standpoint and that type of thing. So making sure they're included, passionate, excited about this, and really kind of our marketing, extending the marketing efforts of the college, I think would be great. So that maybe, I know you had mentioned that external counsel and you talked about K-12 administrators. I wasn't sure if that was including guidance counselors specifically.
It does.
It does. Okay.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't include them at the local level, but it does at the state level. So there's a specific affinity group for high school guidance counselors. I can't remember the acronym at the moment in time, but their executive director is on this council and has been present. So hopefully we can work back at the local level. But I agree with you, guidance counselors and K-12's voice has to be part of this in order for us to get to scale. Thanks, Peter.
You bet.
Okay, the last person to speak on this will be Roberta, and then we'll be moving on to our next agenda item. Roberta, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll be really quick if I may. I just wanted to say, CEO Heineck, that the Amistad School, which is local to New Haven, but they're a part of a charter group that works with both Housatonic and Gateway. I have to say they do an exceptional job. We've collaborated with their guidance counselors where we'll give them space on campus. We'll have lunch with all the students from that institution on campus. They do some one-on-one purposeful work with the students. I do sometimes same stuff with the college with those students. And, we really spread it out, but really created that community. So they had the support from their home institution, school rather, as well as the support from the college. And just that might be a group that you might want to tap into.
That's awesome, Roberta. I'll follow up with you and try to get some time to explore that model.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Karen and Provost, thank you both for coming to talk to Senate. What is the next step? I know you talked about establishing the new council. Is that a solicitation that we expect to see coming soon?
Yep.
What are some things we should be looking for?
So we will send you, Al, what that solicitation looks like for membership for the Early College Dual Enrollment Task Force Group. And if you can help promote it, that would be great. And we will also, I'm sure, be coming back to you guys with recommendations once that task force is formed. We're hoping it will be able to launch in January and that we will be able to make some incremental policy shifts yet this academic year to help us for next year, knowing that that's an iterative process, that there will be more that will need to happen the following year. And at the same point in time, there's a parallel conversation that needs to happen at the state level around funding legislation and statute that CT State is also hoping to be at the table with. that we'll come back to you with.
Great. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you guys and happy holidays.
Take great care, everyone. Happy holidays.
All right, folks, the next item on our agenda is a report from Curriculum Congress. I am not aware of anything there. Does anyone here have a report to share from Curriculum Congress? Okay, then we will go ahead and, oh, yes.
Hey, I can just share that Curriculum Congress met last week. We accomplished quite a bit of business. It was an important meeting because things need to be in the process to get board approval for next year's catalog. They also approved the Gen Ed committee framework, and we'll be looking for representatives in elections for that to stand up in the spring semester. So that was a big lift, and I think a big accomplishment. I want to recognize that the Gen Ed committee will be forming. Hopefully, folks, that was shared out by campus reps to everybody. If not, I can certainly forward it, and we can send it out to this group.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, we have updates from our Senate committees. The first committee is Administration, Staffing, and HR. Who is the chair for that committee, or is there a chair for that committee?
Hi, this is Jen. It's actually Brian, so he's not here today.
Right.
So I put together the notes and I sent it to him. So if you want, I could go over that now.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So we met on the 8th. It was a really good conversation, and we came up with 4 main points that we want to try to address. The first was understanding the 52 paused positions. So I'm not sure, I haven't heard back from Brian yet about where that was going to go, but we were going to request a breakdown of the 52 paused positions, including faculty and staff, and then try to get a better understanding of how these understaffing for support services are impacting student experience. The second concern was equitable compensation for staff and faculty, and I believe this was more for serving on this, for governance committees, and it sounds like you guys may have worked out some of that already. So from that, staff and faculty have multiple hats. Compensation is not equitable across position, mainly staff versus faculty. And so I guess I'm more interested in what you were talking about at the start of the meeting, and we'll see those tables. Human resources, there was a big discussion on this one, that onboarding process in general is not ideal. There's a lot of people recounting the issues they had with just not being given adequate information to understand benefits, CT state, and benefits and structures, including unions. And lack of training for unions. And I think I've seen this one happen with us, like which union you are in, all that important stuff. Clarification of functions of the jobs, including governance committees, roles, to better understand the roles that we are walking into. Concerns about how HR is understaffed and that campuses are inconsistently staffed, which makes it hard to reach HR in a timely manner. And then talking about some mistakes there have been for regarding payroll, really, about how money has been incorrectly paid into pensions, the adjustments that the incorrect funds, money paid into incorrect funds, and that's resulting in financial hardships for faculty and staff. And we all were talking about that a little bit more. And then concern about DEI hiring practices, just we want to make sure that our hiring practices will support a diverse workforce with respect for skills, race, ethnicity, types of experiences, religion, socioeconomics, and all those critical factors. And then we need to make sure that our search committees are actually diverse. Sorry, my cat's just me. And then I think that was pretty much the main issues that we talked about.
Those are the highlights.
Those
Great.
are the highlights.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you stepping in.
No problem.
Next is the bookstore committee. Has the bookstore committee met yet? And who is the chair?
We don't have a chair. I made the mistake of offering to coordinate the first meeting at the on the Senate when we met the last Senate meeting. So I'm going to say I'm the pseudo chair, but I'm not the chair. Having said that, we had a very good discussion last month when we met. We tried to set up another meeting for December, but December, as we know, is a very, very difficult month. And so we were not able to do that. I'm hoping to be able to have a meeting in January. We did, however, reach out and talk to Carrie Kelly, because one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to sort of get a better feel of where we are in terms of what the contract is, educate ourselves on what is the back and forth, what are we obligated to do, more importantly, what are they obligated to do, and get the information we need from our side, but also get the information we need from the bookstore in order to come up with an effective policy, effective practices, something that's going to work. We need to know, who has skin in the game and how their skin is in the game. So that's where we are right now. We're in the information gathering session. As I said, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to schedule a meeting in January once faculty are back for the semester, and then we can continue to move forward, review the documents that Carrie Kelly was kind enough to send, and collaborate with her. And she has a working group out of her office. So we're hoping that that will be helpful and fruitful collaboration as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Miguel. Appreciate you filling in as chair in whatever capacity that is.
Pseudo. Let's not forget the pseudo chair.
I'm going to ignore the pseudo part and move on to the Budget and Finance Committee. Who is chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, and do you have a report?
This is Mark Molesky, and I am chair. Very short report, just to say we're very grateful that CFO Kelly has been attending our meetings. And the only thing that I have to report at this point is that the audited budget as of June 2023 is now posted to the CT State website, and I just provided the link in the chat.
Thank you very much, sir. Next is bylaws, the bylaws committee. Who is the chair?
It would be me, Sarah Perez. We met this morning, and what we did is we caught up a few of our members up to speed, what was done over the last 2 semesters. And then what we started to do is started to go through the language. We have another meeting. We have 2 meetings scheduled for January, one at the beginning and one towards the middle of the month, and where we're going to go through the meeting minutes from the prior semesters and identify those pieces of language that we need to update. We also talked about organization and efficiency, and this is something that we can maybe put on the agenda for January's meeting for this group, is looking at, could we possibly move to Teams versus the SharePoint, just because with the information coming through, being able to capture likes or if multiple people agree with a statement being said or something, I feel Teams chat or Teams might be better, more conducive to capturing conversations while we're not in meeting. But that's something we can talk more about in January. So we started going through the document language, and we're starting to go through where we need to update.
Thank you, Sarah. The next committee is elections. Who is chairing elections?
That is me. It's Nicola. The elections committee met on December 1st. We were able to establish, we have meetings scheduled for January 19th, February 9th, and February 23rd. Our first order of business was establishing the staggered terms. We had a motion that was seconded and voted. I just dropped into the chat what was passed by the committee. I don't know if that is something that we want to think about voting on today for this body or in January when we come back. But I do want to remind this body that elections must be completed by April 30th. So the sooner we are able to get this approved, if the body wills it, the better that will be for the elections committee. The next thing that we will be working on at our January 19th meeting is how are we going to organize the elections for the part-time representation and students. And that's all I have.
Nick, what is the ask related to the motion? Well, the
I would-
information you dropped in.
If it is appropriate, I would like to have a motion and a discussion to see if that, what I dropped into chat, can be approved for the determination of staggered terms.
Alan?
Yes, I would like to move that the Senate adopt the language put forward by the Elections Committee.
Alan, would you mind reading the motion? Because we will have to create the minutes from the recording, the chat doesn't capture it.
Okay. Each campus will choose one senator to serve a one-year term the 2024-2025 academic year. Additionally, 6 campuses chosen at random will choose a second senator to serve a one-year term for the 2024-2025 academic year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who was
Kirsten.
that? Kirsten, thank you. Discussion on this item? I have a question, Nick and Alan. Does this set up so that each campus has one position up for election each year, and that way 2 people always have the institutional experience and memory in serving?
Because it's half and half. Nick, do you mind if I jump in for a second? Because it needs to be half the senators, right? And there are 3 from each campus. So it's only going to be the first year where 18 senators will serve a one-year term. Subsequent to that, every year, senators will be elected for 2-year terms.
Because we have 2-year terms, not 3-year terms. If we had 3-year terms, then it would be, I see. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Peter.
Yes, I was wondering if there was a stipulation about what type of senator, in other words, faculty, staff, or at large, that we're talking about.
There was no stipulation. We felt that each campus should be able to be free to make that determination for themselves. And we thought that there may be senators who wish to serve their one-year term and may decide that they are not interested in, or their interests lie in other areas. So they may just relinquish that role. So the choosing can be just a volunteer even.
Peter, do you have a follow-up?
I just wanted to ask if there are any stipulations about how this senator is chosen, or is it each school uses their own process?
Yeah, each school will be able to make that determination for themselves.
Okay.
Or campus.
And then basically, we're going to pick 6 campuses out of a hat, or something to that effect, randomly, that will need to choose a second senator to serve a one-year term.
Thank you. Angelo?
Hi. I heard that CCPs are kind of a disadvantage compared to faculty in terms of having time set apart to participate fully to these meetings. If that's correct, what are the possibilities that CCPs would actually be able to take time off from their office hours so that they can participate to these meetings rather than being split up between work and attending the Senate meetings?
Angelo, I think that there are two things I want to address in the concern that you're raising. The first is that even amongst faculty, there has not been equity. Who has release time or how much time folks have across the board has been incredibly volatile. And that is why the framework was so incredibly important. And that was actually the progress we reported I reported at the very beginning of this meeting. So yes, it has been uneven, but the unevenness is not between staff and faculty. It is simply uneven across the board. And yes, this framework seeks to bring that into alignment so that everyone has the same amount of release and is doing the same amount of work for that release. Kirsten.
Hi, I just added in the chat, and I just want to add for the purpose of the minutes and for clarification in case the comments that were put in were maybe a little confusing, but the random 6 campus selection is a one-time course of action that the elections committee has put forth to set the staggering of membership as we move forward. So that is the purpose. It is just a one-time initial action. And then going forward, we will have positions staggered per campus for the voting of membership for the Senate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah?
All right, I just wanted to ask, because we were reading this earlier today in bylaws. So all of us are up for re-election, right, at the end of May? So okay, can you clarify like our terms and like who's staying? Okay.
1 second, I'm gonna pull it up and I'll drop it into the chat from the bylaws. Okay.
I'm going to say, folks, that this is going to be the most watched segment of any of our recordings because we will need to understand this and there will be implications for it. The good news is we will.
Then if this is something, we don't have to vote then today. As long as we can vote on this in the first thing we do in January, then that's fine. So if people want to just be able to digest this, I'm fine with that too. But I did not make any of the motions, but I'm gonna go get that.
Okay. Alan?
Thank you. Well, my understanding is that, yes, we are all up for re-election at the end of this academic year. And 18 senators will be elected for a one-year term, and 18 senators will be elected for a two-year term. And that is a one-time adjustment. Subsequent to that, all Senate terms will be 2 years. So that's my understanding of the bylaws.
Nick, you should be able to share your screen. And Sarah, go ahead.
All right, one just quick follow-up question. How would it work for, and maybe you haven't gotten there with elections committee, I totally get it, but how would it work for those of us that would want to go for re-election? Is that something, so that's something I just wanted to put out there.
So I think Nick, oh, there we go. Yep, go ahead.
Roberta, I was just looking at the bylaws document, and what I was going to say is that individuals can serve a second term. So if you, at the end of May, if you wanted to run for another term, Sarah, you could.
Actually, we're able to serve maximum of 3 consecutive terms.
Yep.
And the way that I read this, if I may interrupt, I'm so sorry if I'm skipping somebody, is that the first term was the spring semester and this year. So that's, I read that as one term or one year of a 2-year. So I read this as that half the people that are not going to be chosen will get to do another year, and that will count as their full term. But maybe I read it wrong.
Bylaw committee members from the original. Maybe we should ask that, if this is Roberta, I'm sorry, maybe we should ask whoever made the initial motion to withdraw it so that we can make sure everyone is completely clear on their interpretation for January.
I'm not hearing a withdrawal. Alan?
I mean, I made the motion. I'd like to get clarification on our reading of the from the bylaws. Certainly it can be tabled, but let's see if we can get this clarification. I'd rather see it tabled than withdrawn.
Okay.
Which counts as a single term, not as a single year. That's the thing, Nicola, that makes me wonder if it's, I don't know.
Oh, if I may.
Go ahead, Mike. Sorry, I was reading deeply.
That's okay. I just will state, remember, because this was being stood up, the bylaws came after the initial elections. And I believe it was clear in the initial elections that the first elections would be for about an 18-month period or 15-month, January 2023 through May of 2024. Now the bylaws came afterward, and if the bylaws are saying that half of those senators were actually elected for another year, that was not the original intention of the elections. And I think people may not have realized that they were actually being elected for a 2.5-year term. So originally the elections were for January semester of 23, the spring semester, and then all of this year. So I would argue or weigh in that everyone is up for re-election. But if you decide that some are up for 1-year terms and some are up for 2-year terms, I certainly understand that.
Do we have any of the original documentation? Because I know that, well, I can't say I know, but I'm pretty positive when this was written, we did not want the entire Senate to be up for re-election because we wanted history. So we wanted only half of that Senate.
I agree.
To
That
be
was
up for
part of
election.
our
Agree.
original-
Yes.
That was part of our original
was-
discussion.
Yes, it was. You're correct.
Yes, it was intentional. So,
However, then what that means is that what's the purpose of electing half of the representatives to a 1-year term? Because we're all
then they're
going to
done.
be up. Then everybody will be up for re-election the end of the 2024-25 year. That doesn't make sense.
it was decreed the stagger, Alan. It was decreed
Right.
the stagger so that
Yeah.
But that won't create a stagger.
No, it will, because they're
if
done
we stay.
serving after this year. So half will not serve again. Those people that are chosen do not serve again. That their term is completed in May, and that we will be holding elections to replace them. That's
Well, then it should just be a 2-year. They should just be elected to 2 years then.
no.
If the other half
so-
if the other half is staying another year, otherwise it's not going to be staggered.
No, it is, right? The people that we're choosing right now, like on this, the one that we are going to choose, they are done. Their service, their term is over. And that we will then be running elections to replace those people that have finished or completed their entire term. And that the other half that are stay for another full year. And those people that are elected at the end of this year are doing a 2-year term. So then we have established the staggered terms.
Okay, but that's not what this says. It says that one half shall be elected to a 1-year term. At
And
the end
yes,
of
and
this.
they're the ones that are being elected to that 1-year term.
But if they're being elected to 1-year term, then at the end of the 2025 academic year, right, May of 2025, they're up for reelection again because they've served 1-year term. But you're saying that the other half
It's because of the years. I see what
Other
you're
half.
saying. I'm looking at the years now. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, I think
Maybe
it
maybe
needs to be
bylaw
withdrawn.
needs to clarify this.
This needs to
Can
be
we wait till
withdrawn.
January?
Yeah, it has to be withdrawn. We have to get this clarified.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I withdraw the motion.
So
And
can we ask the Elections and Bylaws Committee to work together to determine what the intent is, and then come back and share that at our January meeting? Angelo, I see your hand.
Yeah, so since you guys gotta go back to the drawing board somehow, I'd like to share one thing. Well, first of all, I'm super happy to have had the opportunity to be part of the Senate. But I'd like to share with you guys that nobody wanted to do it. I mean, I was the only one, and nobody else wanted to do it. So there was a desperate call from our supervisors to ask somebody to please volunteer. Now, what happens in case that would happen again somewhere else or Middlesex again? Is there a provision in the bylaws that would address this in case nobody wants to do it? Then what? That's my question.
So I'm not hearing a response, but hopefully, Angelo, somebody has captured that question and they will.
That's what happened to
Well,
me. I don't know if that happened to anybody else.
I mean, honestly, Angelo, that's an institutional problem that your institution has to figure out. Like your campus governance leaders need to figure that out.
Well, you can't force people, obviously,
If I
to
can make a comment
volunteer.
on that, I can tell you, go ahead, Al.
Alan's hand, and then you're next, Miguel.
Thanks, Al. So I did want to ask, since we're going back to the drawing board a little bit here to get clarification, Mike and President Maduco, if the decision was made to have this half of the sitting senators continue for an additional year and half elected to a 2-year term this April, is that okay from your perspective? Even if it's not exactly the way that you envisioned it, would you have an objection if we came up with that model?
I would have no objection because the language and the spirit all along was that there would be alternating elections, that there would be folks, half the body would turn over each year. So I think that's the spirit. How we get there, I think the group and the prior provost did not want to define that. So that she wanted, Maya, when she was working on this, and I won't speak for President Maduco, but, that was the spirit all along. So I think how you get there is really up to this group. So
thank you.
It's a self-governing group. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my only source of concern would be, I guess, the nature of the turnover, right? Because now that the College Senate is becoming more diversified in terms of standing committees, and obviously those committees and those subunits are doing their respective work, to see turnover in those areas. Like, that's my concern in terms of how much time would that eat up the following year for the Senate body to kind of make up in terms of newbies serving in those areas. That's about it. But I think ultimately, you know, the institution or my office can have this overarching intrusion into this process. You guys have to work it out. I think you're seeing it. I think you're seeing, wait a minute, this language doesn't make any sense. We have to go back not to the drawing board, but revisit this to make sure that it makes sense.
Thank you.
Miguel.
Yeah, I want to circle back to Angelo's point for a minute. You know, in terms of recruiting people for both Senate, Congress, SACs, and SDCs, you know, it was a great unknown. And we were trying to figure out how this was going to work, and we needed people to sort of take a leap of faith. I can tell you that, you know, at the time I was one of the co-chairs of our governance body on campus, and Alan was my co-chair. And we ran around like maniacs recruiting people. I mean, it was old school Chicago style politics, vote early, vote often, but we need our voice in the room. And the way I sold it and Alan sold it was, this is going to happen. So if you want to be a part of the discussion, you need to be in the room. But having said that, that was a year and a half ago, right? Or a year ago, I guess it was. Having said that, I think the difference now is there's a body of work, and we can see what it is, how it's working, how it's evolving. We can see changes that are being proposed and are going to be made regarding compensation, time, and all of that. So I think people can now look at something which is not a complete abstract, but is something real, and make those determinations. But if people choose not to participate, that's their choice. You know, I don't want to speak for Alan, but I know we felt very strongly, and, you know, Roberta, who succeeded me, I think feels equally so, that this has a value, and that's why we are running around and trying to make sure that people stay engaged and involved in the process.
Are you saying that a college might not be represented in case nobody wants to do it?
If nobody wanted to do it, that would be yeah, that's how it would go. I mean, how else are you going to do it?
I don't know, but maybe allowing the former senator to run again. I don't know, something like that.
You can run again, though. You can. There's a term limit of, what is it, 3 terms that you can serve?
Yeah,
3
6
terms.
years.
So that's 6 years, potentially, depending on how the stagger works. So, I mean, if after 6 years you can't get more people to, then I think there's a bigger issue there, you know. But hopefully we won't have to cross that bridge, Angela.
All right, thank you, guys.
Given there is an appetite to make some changes, I want to put forward an idea of changing terms to be 3 years, and we elect one person from each campus each year, so that we keep the continuity of at least 2 sitting senators from each campus. And I'll put that forward to both the bylaws and the election committee to consider. I think the institutional memory and the experience as we are starting to do this work are really important in order for us to be successful. Anything else from these committees before we move on to the Council of Faculty and the Staff Council? Bonnie, that's a hint to you. You said you wanted to.
Yes, I apologize for the delay. Another email came in. I wanted just to make a note, because I think for HR and the staffing issue was to really hit on the issue in regards to the payroll issue out of HR for new employees. President Maduka, we wanted to make sure that we highlighted this point a little bit further in, because there are staff like myself that when onboarded, there was a lot of miscommunication in regards to to where we were for retirement. So for a new employee, after 5 months, I'm paying back over $3,000 into a retirement fund that was not appropriately selected at my onboarding. And that is something that we truly need to correct in the future, because honestly, coming into a state employee, a stated position, that is not something that should be occurring. So we did highlight that as a priority, but more so is that that's a huge HR issue. I could only sign papers saying, yes, I accept this on the council side of HR, but that council is not occurring to employees from our generalists on each of our campus. And I'm talking about my campus, but it was also felt that from our committee that it was something that was occurring across the board. And so that is something that we truly need to prioritize. If we truly want to keep people employed in our community colleges. And so I just wanted to bring that forward because it's becoming more of an issue than it not being an issue. Thank you.
John.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that. I had a very similar experience where I wasn't able to get counsel and explanation, and there really was not much of an onboarding process from HR in that area, from Northwestern's perspective.
Dr. Mendico.
Yeah, I share your pain. I think every month I become aware of what is afforded to me as an employee of the state. So that's been an interesting ride. I think what would be helpful for the college and the administration is, upon the committee reports, especially highlighting these issues, and President Vandermark, you and I can work together. It's submitted to me. I share it with the cabinet. They trust me. The administrators have their own areas of concern, and then as an institution, per my office, it's formally submitted to the system office and the sub departments of shared services. So remember, HR is not a part of CT State, right? It is a shared service at the system office level. But as an institution, we can say, well, if you're the service provider and you're failing to provide service to all of its members, in all levels of employment, then we have an issue and we need a formal response and a course of action to kind of fix that. I think that would be helpful versus I think individually people are doing what they need to do to say, wait a minute, I didn't get X, Y, and Z. But I think as an institution for us to say, we have the numbers, we have the qualitative responses. I think that would be more powerful.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the first meetings with the Council of Faculty to the Provost, and then the Council of Student Services and Experiences with the Provost and Vice President Tamika Davis. In the interest of time, I'm going to summarize very briefly some of the issues that we talked about with the Council of Faculty, and then I'll pause and ask faculty to join in on anything that I may have missed. There's going to be a work group to discuss the spring final exams schedule. It needs to be more digestible and student focused. So we expect to see that kick off early spring semester. A central question related to the final exam schedule is, what problem is this solving? And how prevalent is the problem? So are we solving a problem for 5 students when we're having an adverse impact on 4,000? What exactly are we doing and why are we doing it? Another important piece that we talked about was the syllabus template. We discussed collecting feedback from faculty. I am not aware of a whole lot of faculty having feedback this late in the semester, so we are going to collect feedback on that suggested syllabus template. Early in spring semester, I suspect faculty will have a lot to say again as they revisit that. Here's why collecting feedback is important. We expect to see the syllabus template deployed and mandatory for fall 24. So this feedback period for spring is really important. And then we talked a little bit about AI guidance and how that came about and how we might move forward in the future. We're not doing anything right now, as well as the course cancellation process. I'm not going to go into details there because we do have a report from the course CAPS, which includes course cancellations in their recommendations. But one of the things we talked about a lot was why there is a threshold at CT State of 14 to 16 students to pay the bills, when at many institutions it's as low as 10 and sometimes 13, but ours is significantly higher. And then we explicitly talked about how establishing routine conversations is going to be key to solving problems, but also limiting the number of problems that we have. Faculty, did I miss any big things there? Do you want to add anything else? Literally read it from my notes, so I think we did okay. All right. John, I'm going to hand off to you to report on the Council of Student Services and Experiences.
Hey, I appreciate that, but I did not bring my notes to that meeting, to this event. So if you have them handy, that would be fantastic.
Oh boy. Well, I can get them, but you know what, folks? How about if we take our break? We are at our break time. I will pull up the notes for that one and we will come back to it. So
Good idea.
Let's take a 5-minute break. It's 2:12. We'll resume at 2:17. Thank you. Nick, using the timer was excellent. Thank you very much. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and resume. If you could turn your cameras on so we know you're there. There we go. John, did I see that you were able to access your notes?
Yeah, I have a pared down version, so it'll be brief, but I'll just cover real quick.
Great, thank you,
some of the
sir.
conversations. Yeah, so of course we had a conversation. We talked about CPAS, and there was some discussion that we need to have ongoing discussion about some of the issues going on, especially around not harming students as we bring them in, transfer credit issues that also came up as a conversation. And we had some discussion about the plan of attack for dealing with issues on our end from CT State, but then from other ends, other CSCU schools versus bringing in other students from other schools that are outside our system. We talked a little bit about CRM Advise and brought up some of the problems that people were encountering when trying to use it. There was a good conversation both about the technology itself and then the rollout of the technology and where the hiccups were coming from, whether we needed to look at different technology or just solve problems with the existing technology we had. We had a discussion about the Student Enrollment Council and some of the communication problems that were arising from a decrease in the frequency that they were meeting. And there's going to be follow-up on how the communication flows in those meetings to see whether or not the frequency needs to be increased, or maybe there's other ways that we can convey the information, especially when it comes to areas of responsibility and who's actually in charge of what. There was a lot of conversation about One Stop, primarily about staffing and being able to make sure that students are being served, and some of the reasons that that might be the case, that we don't have enough staffing, and some questions about whether or not this administration may have insight into the staffing levels and how low they are, or why they're not able to be filled, and everybody feels like they're putting extra time and energy in that they don't have to try and serve the students, but at the expense of their job responsibilities and stress. We had a conversation about student onboarding and some issues that we actually want to bring to the Senate first before we talk about them and deal with them in this council meeting. And some of those will be forthcoming from folks like Bonnie. I think does that cover most of the stuff, Elliot, you had?
Yeah, the only other thing I see is there'll be some changes that are supposed to improve the timing of transfer evaluations, and I think the effectiveness. There are some changes happening at the system level in order to address some problems there. That's the only other thing that I had on my notes, John.
Great.
So I do want to emphasize and remind folks that regardless of which council an issue is being discussed, the councils are not to supplant or replace Senate discussion. The discussions happen here first, and then they move to the councils so that the subject matter experts and those closest to the students and the issues have that dialogue with Connecticut state leadership. Roberta.
I'm sorry, thank you. I also had on my notes that we just brought up 12 College Degree Works and Banner, but because we had not discussed it here, we couldn't really address it, but we could expect it at our next meeting.
At this meeting? No, at the next, right.
The next meeting.
Right, and I think that's what John was alluding to, was making sure. So that also serves as a reminder that as there are issues that are coming up, make sure that you identify the issue, you share it with senators, and you ask for it to be put on the agenda so that we can begin to have that conversation and then move it to the councils for deeper conversation. And then it'll come back here, either for informational purposes or for action when warranted. Bonnie?
Thank you. Just a question, because I want to make sure that I'm clear. If we are bringing things up from council, such as one of the admin issues, and I'm thankful that President Manduka gave us next steps for at least the payment, right? The issue with retirement payments and onboarding. But there were other issues such as the 52 positions that still are open. At what point are we looking for that discussion or answers to those kind of questions going to be returned? Are we expecting that those kind of issues are going to come back at a later time? Or is that going to be spoken to or addressed to at the end of all of these updates? Just so that I'm clear in regards to how we're going to propose questions, but also what to expect for next steps for council.
So I'm gonna try to answer your question. I'm not sure I fully understand it. You let me know if I've answered it when I do, okay? What the different committees should be doing is exploring these issues in more detail and then bringing a fully developed question or concern to Senate. And then Senate will vote on those issues. So we got some information today about payroll, but if the admin and HR committee wants Senate to act formally, then that committee would bring a motion to Senate and ask us to do something. And that ask piece, that what are we doing, is becoming incredibly important, whether that's related to solving a problem or identifying a problem or sometimes acting on resolutions. What is the ask? It's not always clear. Sometimes the ask comes as a result of our conversations, but sometimes the ask is known, and that's why it comes before us. So as you are putting forward agenda items, and all of the committees can and should, when an item is ready, put forward agenda items, make sure that we know what the asks are. So does that answer your question, Bonnie?
It does, Al, because I think that how we prepare our notes was not reflected in that manner, so that we can have tangible items to bring forward and really push for more clarity. And so I think the other part that we also need is, if we need further information, where are we gravitating to that? Are we keeping it from the different institutions that we currently represent, or are we forwarding it to this body as an ask, so we can ask the other parts, system office or whoever, to be able to provide that information?
So I think there are two, maybe three parts to that question. One is that committee should absolutely ask other senators. We should have intermittent email conversations that say, hey, we're working on this. What's happening at your campus related to it? So we should be having that inter-Senate dialogue to understand how issues are playing out on the various campuses. If you have an ask of CT State, I think it depends on the ask, but you can either ask Executive Council if it's a big ask, or reach out and make the ask yourself if it's a relatively easy. I think it depends on what the ask is. There was a third thing you said, Bonnie, and I've now lost track of it. I apologize. Oh, no. The other piece was preparing for this meeting. Because our last meeting was our inaugural meetings for our committees, we are really just trying to figure this out, right? So we're trying to establish patterns and practices that help us be more effective. And that's going to be a little bit different for the councils than it is the committees, and then different yet for the committees that are just going to meet a few times, like what we imagine the bookstore committee is, right? It will probably be more short-term, although perhaps not, based on the amount of information that those folks provided.
Thank you, Al. I think that clarifies because I think we all need help in regards to preparing our conversations at our different council meetings. And that will then better inform us how we should be preparing and having those tangible conversations prior to coming to this meeting. And so thank you for clarifying that.
Bonnie, it is my hope that once we are able to share the framework for releasing compensation, that folks will really be able to do Senate work differently because you will know what your hours allocation is. I believe the framework will be transformational because everyone will know how much time they have to commit to the work that we are doing.
Well, I hope that that's true, but I know that the framework we currently have exceeds what the proposed budget was right now. And so some of us are working extended of that framework to ensure that governance is occurring and our voices are being heard. So I hope that more clarity in this framework just makes it for better work practice.
Thank you. Seth.
Thank you, Al. So two questions. First, I wanted to follow up on the issue that Bonnie raised about the 53 vacancies. Our budget committee had asked this same question of CFO Kelly. Basically, what are the 53 or 54 positions that are vacant? And we asked this at the last Senate meeting. And then we didn't get an answer to that question, but we did get a spreadsheet, which I just sent an email to everybody, which lists more information than just the vacancies, but basically how employee headcount has both been changing in a positive and negative direction. But it does show the breakdown for the 54. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. Just so people can see it. It does show the breakdown of where the 54.
Oh, Seth, can you zoom in?
Sure. So might be hard to see, but under negative, one more time, it shows delay rehire. No, I'm sorry, delay rehire to fiscal year 25. I think this is the 54 vacancies that were delayed in fiscal year 24. But to be clear, then they're also going to be delayed in fiscal year 25 as part of the deficit mitigation plan. And the question to CFO Curry was, what are these positions, right? So it looks like there's 1 from Nantucket, 4 from college office, 5 from Capitol, et cetera. So I guess if I could just put the question to President Maduka, since you're here, can you get us this information, the detailed list of the positions? This is this line item here. That's a delay rehire to fiscal year 25, and it kind of has a total of 54.
Yeah, we can, I'll work with Carrie and I'll work with the HR folks to get the information up here. And I suspect come January, the total number will change because obviously we have fluidity on just, people moving on or people joining with us, but we can have a further breakdown of what these positions are and where.
Thank you. And then the second question was just about, and forgive me, I missed the discussion at the beginning of the meeting about the framework this is the framework for compensation of senators or faculty and staff. Where is that framework? Because I don't recall seeing the draft of that recently.
That is what was shared, Seth, that we only received an email late last night saying that CT State supported basically the framework that we had put forward. We had made some edits based on the feedback that we received from Senate, and we discussed that, but we didn't make any progress on it between October and December. We just received an email saying, yes, we agree with you, we're going to work on that, but we don't have it back yet. So we're hoping what President, I said the 1st of February, and President Maduka said, no, we will get that out in January. We don't have the framework yet, but we do have an agreement that basically doubles the amount of time that was initially allotted.
Well, whatever the draft is that's floating around, can you share that so we can see what it is?
You have that, Seth. You actually responded. You gave me feedback.
Okay, no.
Sent to us earlier this year, Seth.
Oh, so okay. Well, I'll still just send the latest one so we're all working on the same one.
Yes. As soon as I get back from break, I will, Seth.
Okay, thank you.
Any other hands there? Okay, that brings us to old business and the course cap concerns. I shared the original document, and then an updated document was sent yesterday, and I did add that to our SharePoint file. So I don't know if Angela or Asantwa is presenting on this today.
Actually, I think I'm starting off
Okay,
on that
Peter.
task force as well. Yeah, this is Peter Astor from Norwalk. And I was wondering if the latest version could be put up on the screen. It might make discussion a little easier. I don't have that right in front of me. Elle or Angelo or Professor Dawson, if you have it, is there a way to get it up on the screen? Oh, there you go. Thank you. All right. I'm just going to start off, and then I'll hand it off to Angelo and Professor Dawson. Essentially, this committee had two goals. One was to eliminate disparities, particularly more egregious disparities in faculty workload, by decreasing the upper enrollment limit to courses, and to some extent by increasing the lower enrollment limit with due consideration for the fact that we have many small campuses that may have some unique problems in terms of low enrollment. So that was the first thing we wanted to do. And the second thing was that we looked at the idea of course cancellations, and we were quickly unanimous that course cancellations should be as late as possible. And the final guideline to that is that courses should not be canceled any earlier than 2 weeks before the start of classes. So we put in some numbers. Hopefully these numbers seem sensible to everybody, but I'll let either Angelo or Asantwa jump in now.
Hi, guys. So if I can, we always talk about students first and enrollment numbers and all that. And based on my experience, that's not criticizing, it just based on my experience, I see the cancellation process is more to cancel courses than to keep them alive, which I think is contrasting with the efforts we all put in to keep students on campus, not to let them go. So that's the business we're in. And I know that, sometimes students need to be told way ahead of time the course has got low enrollments and all that kind of stuff. But the idea of this proposal is to keep students on our campuses. Now, if you factor in, for example, I don't have, unfortunately, data to show for the whole system. I can only speak for Middlesex. And I'm sure that roughly every year we tell 100 students, I think I'm being conservative here, that their courses have been canceled. If you multiply 100 by the 12 campuses, we're talking about at least, conservatively speaking, 1,200 students who were told your course is not running. And unfortunately, we have no data either in terms of what happened to those students. Are they taking another course? Are they going elsewhere? Are they coming back at the next chance they get to take the course that was canceled? We don't have that, and I wish there was some study done on this, because these are not like 1 or 2 or 3 students. It could be easily in the thousands every single year. So the proposal, and that's all it is at this time, is created to make sure that we don't cancel courses so quickly And we're going to be offering, before canceling a course, some options, a plan B, an alternative to what they had selected initially, so that we keep those students on campus in our system. So here, and I know it's a lot of material to go over in the few minutes that we have available, but for example, one of the main ideas is to merge one or two courses that are lower enrolled. I know that some colleges have done that already, but we don't have this as a system-wide policy that it's routinely part of the of this process before the course or courses will be canceled. There would be, for example, allowing students to finish a semester before signing up for next course. Because unfortunately, no, I don't know, unfortunately, but you know that courses have prerequisites. Okay, and sometimes students take a course so they can fulfill the prerequisite. They finally can take the chemistry course, the business course, the Spanish course, but those courses will be canceled before the student ends the semester who is satisfying that prerequisite. You know what I'm saying? So when the student ends the semester, they go, what happens to the course I was planning to take? Well, it got canceled because it had no lower enrollment. But I was trying to enroll in that course, but the system banner told me I couldn't because I wasn't satisfied the prerequisite, which he was in the process of doing. So all these things, when you consider all these things, it looks like the system we have in place right now needs to be improved so that we do what we do in the interest of the students, not just looking at a course, oh, 2 students, well, too bad, I gotta cancel this, it's at the end of it. I don't think that it should. Again, to have here a list of things that could be implemented so that we keep, again, our students on campus. That's the spirit of this initiative and this proposal.
Thank you, Angelo. And at this time, are you presenting this proposal and you're looking for written feedback from senators for something to be voted on in January? Like what is the, yes, okay.
Yes,
okay.
that definitely, I like to have people taking the time and go through it. Again, it's a proposal that Asantewa and Peter worked for many hours, and we actually think we had 3 meetings to come up with these 2 proposals, so people can go over it, and we'll go, we'll talk it about again the next time we get together, because we'd like to see these 2 policies implemented system-wide.
Okay.
So that we all function like one college, because that's what we're supposed to be, right?
Thank you.
So yeah, that would be the intent, Al.
Mike and then Alan.
Thank you, Al, and thank you, Peter and Angelo. I just wanted to share some information which might help inform the work group and inform the senators. Also, I would encourage you to, if your work group doesn't include a campus dean of faculty or academic dean, to reach out. The campus academic deans feel very strongly about the timeline of course cancellations. And I just want to let everybody know what I put in the chat was what we proposed to the deans. Cancellations are done locally by campus. We proposed to the deans probably 6 weeks ago this schedule that the first round of cancellations would occur Thursday the 21st, which was not the last day of classes, is the day grades were due. And that was usually what campuses do is they look at very low sections. We're talking sections with 1 or 2 students at that point. It's kind of a check to see, did we overschedule or underschedule? We can add sections at that point. Usually there's a first round of very low sections, and then there's a second round, and that date that was proposed to the deans was Friday the 5th. There is time needed in the process to generate contracts for adjuncts, both and also for full overloads and partial overloads. There's also contractual commitments to cancellations if adjuncts are being bumped for full timers to make load. So here are some of the dates that you have, which I think need to be taken into account. I'm not disagreeing with anything you've recommended. However, I just wanted to share that that there are some other factors. On the course caps, I do work with the scheduling team, and I was aware of the work that AVP Manuel Gomez had done to make consistent the course cap sizes. And I'm wondering if the committee did any analysis of if this was adopted, how would it affect the schedule, either a fall or spring schedule? Would it create additional sections? Would it reduce sections? Is there a fiscal impact if the courses are lowered? Are you suggesting that some courses be raised? There's a lot of scheduling implications with these courses. And I do think it would have an impact on workload for the schedulers as well as potentially fiscal implications. And if there's a cost, I don't know if the committee talked about how that would be covered. There's also contractual language about, and Seth I'm sure can quote for us about, online courses being the same size as on ground and no larger. So I think there's a number of other items that I would encourage the work group to look at. I'd be happy to meet with you if I could be of any more help. So
Michael, these are great points. I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you.
No, we did discuss finances, and I think we came to the conclusion that the institution of this kind of thing would be pretty much financially neutral. So there would be elimination of some courses, emerging of some, and there might even be a few additional sections offered, but overall it would be financially neutral. We tried not to step on any union contract toes, and we tried to avoid dealing with issues that were primarily union driven. And I'm sorry, what was your last point?
So you're saying that it would result in about the same number of sections, even with lowering of some cap sizes, is that right? And then my last point was just simply the course cancellation timeline, that it might be helpful to speak to an academic dean at a local campus.
We did. I did. I talked to my local dean. I talked to colleagues at Central. I talked to a number of people. I tried to reach out to as many stakeholders as possible to actually come up with a proposal that's kind of makes sense. I liked a lot of things you said, Michael. I think intelligent scheduling plays definitely a factor. Times, unfortunately, too many sections of one discipline are being scheduled that unfortunately cannibalizes courses, they cannibalize courses from each other. Having said that, there are, as I go back to the proposal, some things that really cannot be just looking at how many students are in there. Again, if it's like a course that's the second half of the course that requires the first half. I mean, why can't the students finish with the first half before you cancel the second half? Because students try to sign up for the second course, but Banner told them, I'm sorry, you can't sign up for that course unless you finish the first half. So in that case, it's like, how can I win? So that means students will have to wait 6 months to take the second half of the course, which I don't think is fair. We would love to have you coming to our meeting, and so that we can definitely work out something together that's going to be addressing an issue which I think has been dragging for the longest time. So I'm very happy to have you on board. We obviously will include you with our invitations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Angelo.
I'm sorry. Can I make one or two?
Just very quickly, Peter,
Okay.
we have a number of questions, so go ahead.
Very quickly. It doesn't look clear. Angela, I think you just forgot to type it in. But basically, we're saying that most courses, the cap would be 25, whether they're on ground or online. And The exceptions here would be the basic courses in English and math. And we felt that a cap of 20 would be better, and we felt that that slightly smaller number would actually result in more students passing and moving on through our system.
Thank you, Peter. All right, next up is Alan and then Bonnie.
Thank you, Al. And thank you, gentlemen and Mike, for putting up the proposed contract dates. I do really have a concern, I think, echoing Angelo and Peter's points about such early cancellations, even if those are very low sections. You do have students wanting to take a second part of a course, or who need a prerequisite. Now, fortunately, I don't think it's going to be canceled, but this is the first time I've offered 2 online sections of U.S. history from Reconstruction. I usually just teach one. It filled right away for the fall, and my colleague Roberta suggested, well, why don't you run 2 sections? And so it makes sense as the one section started to fill, and it's now has filled. But and now the second section is filling up, so I don't think it will be canceled. But suppose it's just suppose the GPAs and registrar are putting students into the one section by itself, right? And they're waiting to put it into the second section, but we're still a month out, right? And so say that only had 1 student in it, and so it gets canceled. But it could well fill. They were filling the first section, right? So I think that's a month ahead of time, 4 weeks ahead of time is, and the day that grades are due is concerning to me. It really is. I don't see why you couldn't at least wait until that January 5th, and at that point start evaluating courses. So that's my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And specifically with regard to US2, I want to say that we're seeing significant changes in enrollment, likely because we changed the title of the course.
Yes, and you and I can take credit for that.
And these are unknowns, right? These are not things that we know to look at when we are making these decisions because we are new. Bonnie, I jumped in front of you, but it hung on Alan's point. So I apologize and I thank you. You're up.
Thank you, gentlemen, for this work. This past semester, I heard a lot from students in regards to last minute cancellations. And many students bought technology, especially when it came to Pearson, math, history, some of the languages, Pearson Labs books and Cengage books that are not returnable, but classes were canceled. 2 weeks prior is very close to students not only purchasing books and technology, but also last minute trying to find other courses to be able to substitute. And many of the courses, we were not able to keep them on our campus, and they had to go to other campuses. Some of them could not even drive to the other campuses because they come by bus to our campus. So trying to find a suitable replacement 2 weeks out was a huge problem. I know of 2 students who decided to leave our campus and just not come back. I'm hoping that our relationships will bring them back next term so that they can continue to study with us. But they were not happy at the last minute cancellation. But also we have adjuncts who got contracts and at the last minute courses got canceled. And even access to them being able to get their Blackboard courses syllabus and just the hiring process to get them in prepared is also a very short timeline to be trying to transition teachers who are trying to teach these courses and then having them canceled. The other part I want to make mention, and I don't know if it was thought of, I see that you have listed hybrid microbiology, and I am aware that there are several other institutions that will not take the transfer of courses that are hybrid sciences. it doesn't meet their accreditation requirements. So I think we need to also think about that, as well as our lab techs who prepare for particular amount and number of students in our classrooms, that all of a sudden they go to a hybrid model and the face-to-face courses are left with very few numbers there, and they cannot prepare appropriately to be able to maintain the labs appropriately. So I'm hoping that you've also reached out to some of the lab techs who support the microbiology and other sciences. And then I can imagine that some of the other courses that are not listed that may be going through or have the same requirements. So I just wanted to make mention of those particular items and really think we should rethink about how closely we're canceling courses before the start of the semester.
Thank you, Bonnie. All right, folks, we have 35 minutes and we have some really meaty topics still ahead of us. So I'm going to ask you to be really expeditious in your comments. Let's see, where are we? Oh, wow. So many hands just went down. Sarah.
Okay. It would be a good idea to look at historical enrollment data, even though we've gone through many changes, to see if classes do fill at the last minute. This could inform decision making, and make sure that classes that have a history of filling do not get canceled when they would in fact fill.
Thank you, Sarah. Bonnie, is your hand up again or still? And Peter, your hand.
I just wanted to clarify for Bonnie that hybrid microbiology means you do the lab on ground and it's just the lecture portion that's online. And most schools will accept that. They won't accept online labs, but they'll accept on-ground labs. And that's what we're aiming for. Simple.
But I think that the title of the course can be very misconstrued when a student is transferring it over and that's not made clear. So I think then if that is actually what is occurring, Peter, right, then we need to rename things so that it can be transferred over clearly and not be confusing.
I think it's just called microbiology. It's just the way it's delivered is hybrid. So it's like if you delivered something Elron, it wouldn't be called Elron microbiology. It would just be called microbiology. So I think in what we wrote, it's just saying that you don't load up the lecture portion with more students and then sort of divvy up the lab work, where when it's an on-ground course, you're restricted by the size of the laboratory.
Thank you, Sandra. I think that, so I want to really emphasize here that that these folks were working on bringing this information to us. The critical next step is all of the feedback that you just articulated needs to be sent to them in writing. The discussion is important because it helps us think and it generates different ideas. Michelle, I see your hand. I'm not forgetting you.
Thank you.
So the discussion is important, but they need you to reply to the feedback. They need this feedback in writing so they know exactly what they need to respond to. So with that, I'm going to ask Michelle to be the last person to comment, and then we're going to move to our next agenda item. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my comment is, anytime we make an adjustment to a course, if we could just think about grandfathering. So for example, right now, some of our nursing students are taking online micro with an online lab, and this would affect them without having grandfathering language. So they were worried because the course, while they're actually involved in it, because they were told, go ahead and take it earlier in September, and it's a self-paced, and now it's being told, I'm not going to accept that. So that really caused a lot of angst that I had to take the time and really calm down with students to speak with the director about grandfathering language, so that, as we're phasing something in, how are we phasing it out when we think overall do no harm to the student? I would like that to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. President Meduco, I will reluctantly give you a couple of minutes to respond.
Yeah, real quickly, this is helpful, and I suggest whatever is adopted as practice, or has to be some type of statewide presentation and webinar to all parties to understand the process moving forward. As it relates to transfer, I will just be honest, transfer is really weird in New England. When it comes to, there's just a lot of assumed this course may or may not transfer versus in other states. It's literally baked into the articulation agreement in terms of not only what courses will, and there's a difference between transfer courses. You really can transfer any course. The more important thing is, will the transfer course apply to the course of study at the junior and senior level? And those things have to be baked into the articulation agreement, including what modality or modalities of set courses will be accepted. And that's big work, because we have students that enroll that don't want to go to any Connecticut institution. So we have to start broadening our net, broaden our net and look into the neighboring states. And that's at the core of really transfer work. And I look forward to that, to ensure that we're being upfront with our students. But I'll say this, we have to also hold our students accountable. So let's say a student is an engineer, an engineering student at UConn versus Central is different, right? So if a student says yes, so our students have to declare what institution they want to transfer to, and then we can appropriately advise them. But let's say they change course, change their mind halfway in, and they have to retake courses. That is on them. That is on them for changing courses, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to be put into this place. So everyone is pulling the weight, including our students.
Thank you. All right, folks. Email feedback. It is critical that they have this documented. I so appreciate the smile right now, Sanjwa, because you know how important it is to get the exact language so that we can respond and incorporate. Moving on to our next item, the APP process. Mark, you added this at the beginning of our meeting, sir.
Yes, I thought it turned into a very productive discussion at our last meeting in November. It did become a 30-minute discussion, and we were quite tired and I think unwilling to then discuss a motion at the end of it. So I wanted to offer a motion now. Before I read the motion, which I have placed in the chat, I wanted to say that we're very thankful for the open dialogue with the college leadership. It's been great. And I do understand that this is an urgent matter, that the Board of Regents does want action on this in the spring. Having said that, I do think that there is a low correlation between our mission here at the Senate and the APP committee, and that it would be best located elsewhere, and that if it were located here, it would blur the lines of what we do here and what our own mission is. So I would like to put forth the motion that we respectfully decline participation in the APP committee, and then open it, if there is a second, open that up for discussion.
Mark, can you speak to 8 of 12 campuses have already identified their participants? So more than half are already participating in that.
Yeah, and I think that they could continue to be on that committee. I just, this motion would put that committee in a different entity so that it would no longer be the responsibility of the Senate.
I'm wondering if I'm looking at the 5 things that you put in the chat. Could we discuss these before you make the motion so that we understand in more detail if this is something we want to support? I know it's kind of backwards, And if you want to ask for the second, that's fine. But are you going to ask for 5 different motions?
Nope, just the last line.
Oh, just the last line.
Just the
Okay.
last line. And we probably should get a second before
Yep.
there would be any further discussion.
You've already, yeah.
I'd second having a discussion on it.
Thank you, John. Nicola.
Mark, I have a couple questions, if I may, please. So when you have that the Senate participates, how do you envision Senate participating in this? Because as far as I know, Senate was only tasked with getting this information to the campuses so that a person could be elected to serve on APP. Did you envision that the Senate is going to continue to participate some way in APP?
Yeah, perhaps I'm incorrect, but it was my understanding that it would be a Senate committee.
I didn't think that. Am I wrong in that? Anybody? Can anyone answer that?
It is not a Senate committee. However, because it was coming through Senate, we could invite folks to present to Senate, but it was not a Senate committee. That is correct. We did not charge it.
Okay. I actually have a problem with having the president, I think you said the CEO or president of a campus soliciting requests, because then I think that takes the onus off of faculty and staff, and it could actually lead to CEOs or presidents appointing people to serve on that committee versus allowing campuses to elect whom they would like to serve on that committee. And I think that campuses have every right to not select or elect a person to serve on APP if that campus felt that they did not want to participate. At least that's how I brought it to my campus. And we discussed whether or not we wanted to have someone from Three Rivers serving on that. It was decided yes, and we held an election. So I don't think campuses have to participate if they choose not to, but I definitely do not agree with having a CEO do that. I think this is faculty and staff. It should be faculty and staff driven.
Thank you, Nick. Alan, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my very first thing that jumped out at me. I think I really appreciated the fact that President Maduko slowed this process down, because we know what it looked like at the universities, and called for active participation by shared governance. So I can see the point, Mark, where maybe this would be an ask of Curriculum Congress, but in the end, like for example, on our campus, my colleague Miguel is on both Curriculum Congress and Senate. And so we made an ask at our governance body, the Faculty Staff Council, and we had an election as well. So whether that was me asking or Miguel asking, it's still the matter that the faculty voted for this. Full-time faculty voted for the representative. So, respectfully, I probably will vote against this, but I wouldn't mind it as much if it didn't give campus CEO, somehow. I think that in the fifth one, you say maybe it would better reside within the Curriculum Congress. I think that's a worthwhile point. I don't know that it's. I don't know that I'm opposed, though, to Senate doing it either. Those are my thoughts, respectfully. Thank you.
Seth, and then I have my hand up to go after Seth.
Thank you, Al. I think maybe just to take a step back, my initial concern wasn't that our Senate was soliciting participation, which I agree, I would say is better than, certainly better than our any of our managers, campus managers appointing someone. I think we all want to err on, you know, having our Senate elect people. My concern was that the charge of APP is, in my opinion, was unclear. The charge of the committee, to be clear, there was fear that this is going to be a process used to close programs, because we want to be honest, we don't trust anything that comes out of the board. So if the board is telling campuses to do this APP to, you know, we don't trust why they want us to do it, and we think it's probably an exercise in their part to close programs. Now, with that said, you know, I thought Provost Brown was pretty clear last month that APP is not designed to close programs, so we shouldn't have that fear. So if we're going to believe that, then that somewhat assuaged my primary concern. And furthermore, that the goal from President Duke and Provost Brown was to form the committee and let the committee kind of find their way and go through the process. So I think, to be clear, that you know, that satisfied, for the most part, Mark, just because I'm not sure if we had the same concern, that satisfied my concern at the time. Again, as long as the APP committee isn't going to be running programs are closed, and as long as they're not subordinating the program review that's being done by program coordinators across the state, then I think the rationale was allow our Senate to solicit participation and let the group, and you know, support the process moving forward. I do think there was some mixed signals, however, about, you know, this simultaneously being important and something that, you know, we're basically being forced to do. But you know, then again, doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. So anyway, I just want to restate where my concern was. But just to your point, Mark, it wouldn't be about, I think our Senate shouldn't solicit participation and be in favor of our campus managers doing it. I generally think that's all the worst option.
Thank you, Seth. I want to go through each of the 5 points that you're making, because I understood them differently, but also I think there's more information that I thought we discussed last time. You said curricular affairs don't reside within the charge of Senate. And while I agree that curriculum doesn't, when we start to move into anything that is affairs or adjacent or abuts, that is part of the overlap or the lack of distinctions that I was referring to in my opening remarks, that I think that sometimes we do have some Venn diagram kind of things, and this might be one of them. You suggested that that Senate isn't a body that makes requests of employees. My understanding wasn't that we were taking this to employees, but that you would take it to the governance body where the faculty would and solicit participation. Whether or not that's an uncomfortable ask or not, I think that is a responsibility of senators of taking things back to the campuses and having different kinds of conversations. I would far prefer that these kinds of asks come through Senate rather than going to the CEOs. And then on the final point about whether or not it would better reside with Curriculum Congress, Congress was consulted, and they said that their representation as well as their workload prevented them from acting on this. So it ended up with us in a very logical and vetted process. So I will also not support this motion because I think that we are growing into the work that we are doing, and I really want to see us continue to be the body that is consulted. I would rather see more solicitations come from us than less. And at the beginning of the meeting, President Meduco said, you know, if it's too much, if I need to start asking for committees, then I can do that. I don't want to see that. I absolutely want to have those discussions, and I want to see them come through Senate and from Senate back to our campuses. That is my campus representative perspective, not Senate president perspective, and I'm trying to divorce those two. But I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of this, Mark. We just disagree on the points. And who is next? John.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering, we heard a couple people express some concern about having this go through campus CEOs. And I was wondering, Mark, if you could just maybe provide the counter argument about why it might be a good idea, since you kind of referenced it in point 2 and point 4, just so we can have a better understanding of why you thought it would be a good idea.
I am not tied to that technique, but I wanted to address the concern that maybe it will become increasingly easier for college leadership to use senators for unpleasant tasks. So this was a difficult ask for some campuses. I tried to solicit one of our bodies yesterday and was not successful in getting a volunteer. So I was just wondering that perhaps a different venue would be more effective. But I've heard what you've said, and it's very logical that it also makes sense for senators to make these requests as well.
I think it can certainly cut both ways, Mark. Roberta.
Thank you. Forgive me. I appreciate, Mark, all the work that you and what your campus is dealing with. I don't want to offend anyone involved in the curriculum process, but my campus has experienced a lot of setbacks in trying to move curriculum through the current process. And so I'm very much in favor, excuse me, of having the Senate have a little hand in not necessarily developing the curriculum, but at least in the app process. I think that it could help down the road. And I think that there is some opportunities where we're gonna have to reach out to Congress about curriculum. And I just think this is a good starting point. So I'm not really in favor, I'm sorry.
John, is your hand up still or again? I'm sorry, I thought it was up still, but.
I don't know how that happened. Maybe
Okay.
accidentally hit enter on my keyboard.
Mark, do you have anything else? Do you have any other concerns you want to raise, or maybe a different angle you want to take for this?
I don't. I appreciate the discussion that we've had, and I'm perfectly content with whatever way the vote goes, and I will not be offended, and thank you for the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll call the vote.
Yep.
I'll call.
Oh, don't call the vote, because then we have to vote on calling the vote. So we finished discussion. If you would please withdraw that, John.
Withdrawn.
Thank you. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. Eight, looks like 8. We have 8 in favor. Go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed to this motion, go ahead and raise your hand. All those opposed to this motion. John, add 1. How many are against?
Sorry, you said add 1?
Yeah, mine.
Okay.
Sorry. Here. There you go.
Thank you. That's 21.
21 opposed. Go ahead and lower your hands. And abstentions. Any abstentions? two abstentions. 2 abstentions. The motion fails. But it was a fantastic discussion. And Mark, thank you for such a thoughtful preparation. That was fabulous. I appreciate
It was
it.
a good discussion to have, actually. Thank you, Mark.
Mark, your group did good work on that.
All right, moving on to the first item of new business. Alan, the student handbook.
Thank you. I serve on the Academic Standards Committee, which hears grade appeals on the Gateway campus. And I chaired the committee for a couple of years. I'm no longer chair. But we had a grade appeal from the spring 23 semester. And it was an incredibly laborious and difficult process for the student and everyone else involved. I had brought up a question at Senate last spring about grade appeals. I was directed to the student handbook. I did find the section. I provided that link to our Academic Standards Committee. But the link had subsequently gone dead and come up to something saying that you're going to be hacked or something like that. And it took a lot of digging for the chair of the committee to finally find the process, which is not in the handbook but in the student catalog. It's not clearly articulated. It's not clear that a student would know where to go for that. There are not forms, etc. So our Academic Standards Committee passed the resolution that was forwarded to you. I can share it if you want. It's a little long. I don't know that we need to read through it because it has been circulated. We did want to ask for endorsement by the Senate. Now, subsequent to that, I did get an update from our CEO, Dr. Scott Kalicki, that the link was being repaired, other things were being clarified in the policy. So maybe it's appropriate to ask Mike Stefanowicz, since you're still here. I think you were working on that. Is that what is the status of that?
Sure. Is there anything else you'd like to ask? Because I have a little background on it, yeah, and some thoughts. But the links are being corrected.
I mean, are they now? Because it's really a timely matter. That like right now, a student has, especially in certain courses, they have just 2 weeks to, under the policy, to reach out, to find out what the process is, to reach out to their instructor, the department chair, etc. So
correct. I'll have to check with the web team. I know it was requested that those be repaired and prioritized as soon as possible. I know the language in the catalog has been updated to reflect the process.
Okay.
I also have some background information if people would like that, but if not, I can simply answer questions.
Mike, if you could perhaps hold off until we see if there are more questions, because I do want to weigh in on this. I actually have a question for you, Alan, and then I want to provide some additional information. The grade appeal, is that a local Gateway committee, Alan?
Yes.
It is. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I know the policy is that grade appeals will be decided on the campus. So
right, I just wondered if we had something statewide already, or if there was a larger resource. So thank you. When Alan sent this to us, it sent me down the mole hole of the student handbook, and I did not appreciate it. I was already way too busy at the time. And I started looking at it, and I am very concerned that this handbook is not written to students, reads like a very poorly written legal document. I understand there are legal implications of this document. We still must consider our audience. If we are not communicating important information to our students, we have failed them. The important information, I would like to see CT State solicit what is missing. What can we do better? There is no information that sets expectations to students for what it means to be a student in a college course. I think this connects back to some of the concerns that were raised about dual enrollment and high school partnership. This connects to other issues that were raised about onboarding students and providing students all of the information they need in order to be successful. So I think we can do a lot better. And Alan, I am curious about what exactly your motion is beyond an endorsement, because I want to see CT State solicit input and do better, which is, I think, a little bit more or different than what your resolution asked.
Yes, and I'm certainly open to that. So again, the meeting was shortly after our last Senate meeting, so it's been almost a month has lapsed, I think, since this resolution was written and passed by our committee. It was also endorsed by our Faculty Staff Council. But so the initial ask was going to be to endorse the resolution. I think because there is an awareness at CT State trying to fix some adjustments have been made. There are larger questions. Then I'm certainly open to a more nuanced pathway.
Okay.
This is
Roberta?
May I? Thank you. I think part of our ask at this point should include that we take a closer look to the policy and procedure for grade appeals. There's not a lot that we can do immediately for this semester, but I know on our campus, I'm aware of 4 appeals that were submitted in the last 2 days. Let me correct myself. 4 students who brought forward concerns that they want to appeal their grade in the last couple of days. So that's concerning, but there's still some things on the website I'm looking at that are still not correct. And I'm not sure how the procedure or the policy came about. I don't have it on our list. And so maybe that background information would be helpful. But I also don't want to take everyone's time.
Thank you. Rhonda and then Bonnie. Rhonda, did you put your hand down?
I'm sorry, I thought I was hitting unmute.
Okay.
I agree the grade appeal needs to be discussed and the handbooks all need to be fixed and all that. But before we vote on whether we're endorsing this resolution, I have a problem with the tone of the resolution. And I don't think it behooves us as an organization to have such an emotional beginning to this resolution. That's it for me.
Thank you, Rhonda. Bonnie.
Rhonda, I have to agree with you in that aspect, but also there are several different renditions that I have found once this was shared with us, and one of them had DEI coordinator on campus was also one of the resources that students were to go to, which is very unclear as I am a DEI coordinator on my campus. And so I think looking at different versions that are out there is going to behoove us too, so that students are not finding multiple different language and verbiage in regards to how to go to a grade appeal.
Thank you, Bonnie. Mike.
Yep. Real quickly, I just want to confirm the links are correct in the student handbook that is posted on the website. They link to the catalog where there's detailed information on the appeals processes. That should be all correct and should not be inconsistent, to Bonnie's point. I can share that the policy was developed by a subcommittee of the Academic Dean's Council. That work began with Amy Fest last summer, almost a year ago, and was reviewed and vetted multiple times by the Academic Dean's Council, who agreed to that. I do agree with the comments about the tone of the resolution. My personal opinion is that a few of these items could have been a simple phone call or email, that a broken link is out there. Our catalog hosting site changed after the handbooks were posted, and we could have simply updated links had once we knew about it. I'm concerned that items are being brought to a resolution level and that language is being used in an attempt to kind of gotcha in a sense. And working with our catalog team, I worry about the impact that language about holding people accountable sends to them when they're working incredibly hard trying to update material. I would just, encourage folks to try and think about the impact that that language may have. And I'm certainly willing to take any suggestions about any issues that people have. I think I respond relatively quickly to folks. So if you have other items, if you find broken links or concerns, I'm happy to work on those. I can just say that the information that's up there should be correct. And it should have been communicated to all faculty, during the semester. But I'm happy to continue to share it out as needed. So that's a little bit of the process. I don't disagree with the content of the resolution. There were broken links. And I do believe that it would be helpful for folks to look at that policy again and review it and make suggestions on changes at that time. So thank you.
Mike, the accountability language, I do not think, and by all means, Alan and anyone from Gateway, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not read that as directed at the folks who are doing the updates. I read that as targeting the original group of people who are responsible for the language of this handbook. Alan, did I misunderstand that?
No, you're correct. I think it expresses a frustration that, as we've all acknowledged, it's been a very bumpy start to this, to the transition to the one college, and many issues that, faculty feel should have been addressed, fixed, smoothed out before the consolidation was implemented. And so, I didn't personally write the language, but members of that committee did. And I think it expresses sort of a general frustration that may be larger than just this issue as well. But it was quite an extensive process for the student. The student almost wasn't able to launch the appeal. The head of the committee had difficulty navigating. We still don't know if there's an actual form to fill out. If there are forms now made available. But the last thing I would respond to is that no, there's been no communication. I asked for this last spring, and I was kind of scolded for asking it. Oh, it came out in the student handbook. That came out in an email 2 months ago. There was nothing that informed campuses about the grade appeal process for CT State. We still have not received any communication from CT State or from our academic dean about that process. In fact, the academic dean did not know the process, right? So there has not been communication. And that's another reason for the frustration. We would welcome it.
Alan, to add to that point, I went to my academic dean and raised issues about not having definitions about how a student discovers information about course expectations, what it means to be a student, and if they're not meeting them, as well as something else that is escaping my mind at the moment because I am getting tired. We have now hit our 3-hour mark. I'm going to have to ask for an extension. If we don't have it, our last meeting will be over here shortly, folks. To that point, my academic dean also had no information whatsoever. So a confirmation that the academic deans either don't have or they don't know that they have access to this. Roberta, I'm sorry, I once again jumped in front, but I wanted to hang that on Alan's point.
That's quite all right. Also, the Guided Pathways advisors didn't know, and the policy, the process tells students to seek guidance from them. So, and that still is there. So that was just one concern that to advocate for the GPAs. Yes, they catch a lot from students and a lot of questions, but there was no way that they could even figure out what that process was, and that put them in a very compromising position.
So just to clarify, the appeals form, the process, and the grade change form were all sent to all campus academic deans, the final version on November 21st. I will share that with this body so everybody here has it, but that information did go out. And again, I understand, Alan, the frustration. I recognize that. And you know, certainly not everything has been perfect. I'm the first one to admit that. So my comment is just simply that sometimes the language, people may feel, you know, attacked by the language. It may not be directed at them, but they may not realize that based on the details of the language. And I would just caution people when resolutions are being created to think about how they might be read and interpreted, especially by staff who are working hard. That's all. So I'll forward that email to everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate those remarks. Thanks, Mike.
All right, folks, it is 3:33. We still have the Campus-Based Academic Affairs Committee from Sandra, and the proposed resolution for campus endorsements, and then a discussion related to resolutions. Is there a motion? If we don't have a motion, then it will be time to adjourn. So is there a motion to extend our meeting time?
Motion to extend.
Seth, literally in the last second. Is there a second?
I will second for the purposes of discussion, Garcia.
I'm sorry, Alan, I missed what you said.
It was Miguel.
Oh, Miguel.
I said for the purposes of discussion. I will make a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
And I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do we have to discuss these things today? Like how important, what I'm asking is how important is it? Everybody's tired, everybody wants to go home. I get it. How critical is it we discuss it? Because if it's critical, then we need to do it. If it's not critical, then let's push it to January. So that's the question I want to ask.
Well, I believe that I have already lost the other senators who worked on the resolution for, hold on, I have to go back to the agenda. The proposed resolution for campus endorsements. I can actually take care of that in about 30 seconds. It does need, oh,
Felicia.
there you are, Felicia. Sorry, I thought I saw you had left.
No, I'm here. I'm just trying to multitask since we went over. I have an active toddler, but if we do have 30 seconds to just address it quickly, I would like us to move forward with that resolution or discuss it if possible.
We're trying to get it back to the campuses for endorsements so that we can act in January, Miguel. I can't speak to the other issues because I didn't help with the FAC resolution.
So I know Paulina's been sitting here in the meeting for 3 hours. And you know, as chair of FAC. Okay, thank you.
Seth?
When is our next Senate meeting again?
The fourth Friday in January? I think it's the 26th, Seth. Yep.
I would just say, I do think the FAC resolution on the tuition increases and the response to the deficit mitigation plan is timely. So that's why I was in favor of us extending the discussion so we could discuss that and endorse the FAC resolution.
Can I call the question then, so we can just vote and continue?
You call the question, do we have to vote on calling the question? Can you withdraw the call and we can just vote to extend?
I recall my my call to question.
I'm sorry, Al, I have a quick point I want to make. Can we put a hard cap on the extension? Otherwise, it's an unlimited extension. So I would suggest we amend the main motion to say, extend the meeting not to go past 4 p.m.
3:50.
On December 22nd, 2023. So we're clear on the time of the day.
Who made the motion? Seth?
That's fine.
Okay, we have a hard stop at 4 o'clock. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those in favor, please raise your hands. John, how many in support do we have?
21.
21. Please lower your hands. Peter, there we go. All those opposed? All those opposed? All those opposed? We have 4. Please lower your hands. Any abstentions? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. 2 abstentions. The motion carries. All right, folks, the meeting is extended to 4 o'clock and we have a hard stop. We're moving on to our next agenda item, which is the Campus-Based Academic Affairs Committee. Sandra, the floor is yours. Sandy? Anyone?
Elle, it's Kirsten. She put a note in the chat that she had to leave to help a student, and I do not know anything about that, so I can't speak to what she's on the agenda for.
Okay, excellent. We're going to table that item for the next meeting. The Campus-Based Academic Affairs Committee is tabled to our January meeting. Felicia, our proposed resolution for campus endorsements. The floor is yours.
So everyone, I think you may have seen in the email earlier this week that we sent out a resolution about the tuition increase. I did forward the new this resolution to Housatonic, and it was approved 17 in favor, 2 against, and 1 abstain. So I'm hoping that we can spread this to the other campuses so they can endorse it and we can move forward in January.
So Felicia, we aren't. Just so folks know, Felicia, Crystal, and I worked on this together.
Yep.
We used many of the resolutions that were circulating at the time, including the FAC resolution, and we sought to focus this on the ways in which CT State Community College is being hamstrung in its infancy after years of the board and CSCU insisting that the one college was going to be successful, and it can't be successful if we are limiting it and increasing the tuition for our students. Felicia, did I miss any main points?
I don't believe so.
So what we are asking is for you folks to take this resolution back to the governance bodies at your campuses. We would like, our goal is 100% support so that when it comes back to Senate, we can vote to support this with 100% support at our campuses. So that is our ask. Are there any questions? Alan.
Which is the exact document, the title of the document?
It is in our SharePoint folder, and it says draft CT State resolution on Board of Regents and CSCU budget remediation, tuition, and fee increases for 2020 for FY25.
Okay, so that's.
Did you find that?
Draft CT State on Board of Regents, and yes, got it.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks.
Sarah.
Would it be possible to have an email sent out to everybody just reminding us with the full title to reach out to our campuses? With that, I know, I'm sorry.
At some point, can it happen? Yes.
Okay,
will
right.
it happen? Will it happen in the next 2 weeks? I can guarantee it will not.
That is absolutely fine. Thank you very much.
Isn't it though, if you click on the link that you sent to the senators, it's in there?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, if it's already in there, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, go to the email that came out from the CO Senate. I think it was like on
I'll
Wednesday
find it.
or Thursday.
Thank you.
It's there. You're welcome.
Alan, is your hand up again or still?
Sorry.
Okay. All right, moving on to our next agenda item, the FAC resolution. Alan, I believe you put that on the agenda.
Well, this is very similar to the resolution that we've been asked to bring back to campuses. So am I correct in that, Kalina? I don't know if you saw the other document or
I
not.
don't have access to the Senate folder, so I can't be confident.
Okay.
We used the FAC resolution as a foundation for the work that we did.
So maybe Kalina's been here all afternoon. If you just want to share your perspective and that'll help us, I think, in considering this other document. But our Faculty Staff Council did endorse the FAC resolution.
Kalina, the floor is yours.
Sure. So not much to say. The resolution is pretty self-explanatory. It critiques both the extent to which Students First has achieved its goals and calls for or states our opposition to the tuition increase. I will say that, speaking to Seth's claim that this is really timely, legislative session begins on February 7th, and one of the things about the resolution that increased tuition is that there is this flexibility in the last paragraph that seems to suggest that there is room for modification of this 5% tuition increase. And one would hope that if the legislature were to miraculously somehow give us a good amount of money, there would be room for movement there. So that's the idea of sort of just having the word of the Senate along with FAC so that we can pass that message along.
Kalina, what was the day that the legislature opens?
February 7th.
So if we are able to get all of the campuses to endorse the CT state resolution, and then we pass that resolution and endorse FAC, that could really be a 1, 2, 3 punch in order to use with state legislature. Is that correct?
Potentially, yeah. Again, I haven't seen the content of that other resolution, but sure, yeah, the more, the better.
Okay. Sarah, is your hand up again or still? There we go. Okay, Seth.
So I want to make the motion that we vote on this FAC resolution today. I think the resolution itself is straightforward enough for our Senate today to take a position and endorse it. So make the motion that our Senate endorse the FAC resolution.
This is Roberta, second.
Thank you, Roberta. Seth, are you speaking to the motion?
Well, just to reiterate that, every more inch of energy and advocacy we have to stop the tuition increases and to get the funding we need and to put pressure on the legislators we need. So I think our Senate, speaking loudly to say this is wrong for our students, it's terrible policy, and frankly to put pressure on Governor Lamont and our legislators, I think we need to take. So that's why I frankly think the resolution is a no-brainer. That all of us can honestly assess as factual and true. So for those reasons, I think we move on it, and I'm confident it reflects the will, the consensus already at Capitol. I don't have any doubt in my mind.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'm interested to know if there's any other perspective and if there's folks that might be able to articulate a reason why it would be a good thing to raise the tuition to help cover deficit.
Roberta?
One of our staff at our institution brought up the point that Connecticut has some of the lowest tuition, community college tuition in the nation. And we're really, we don't necessarily demonstrate how students get the biggest bang for their buck here, and that, maybe there needs to be an increase down the road at some point, but does not feel that the budget stronghold should be laid on the feet of our students.
John, is your hand up again or still? And Seth, I think your hand is up again.
Just to reply to John to say, I mean, even the Board of Regents themselves say that increasing tuition will hurt our students and will hurt enrollment and will hurt retention. This was said by most of the board members before they voted. They basically almost publicly said the only reason we're doing this is because of the disgusting budget from Governor Lamont. I mean, I added disgusting, but they said the only reason we're doing this is because we didn't get the funding we needed from the legislature. So I don't think there's any, I think it's a pretty shared consensus between faculty, staff, and administration that tuition hikes hurt our students. It's just due to the underfunding of our system, for over 15 years that we're in this position.
Peter?
Just very quickly, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. The tuition 5% increase would just basically cover inflation, number one. Number two, I read somewhere where it would be the equivalent of, for a full-time student, $123 a semester. And again, it may be a matter of perspective on my part, but I feel that for a full-time student, $123 is really just keeping some skin in the game. So I'm saying that I will vote for the resolution, but I'm playing devil's advocate here because there are some reasons why you might oppose this or accept it.
Peter, I think we were told it was $242 for a full-time student at our last meeting.
I think that's per year rather than per
okay.
semester. Yeah.
Thank you. Bonnie? Bonnie? Bonnie, you're on mute. Bonnie, your hand is up, but you know. Okay. Okay, I'll go to the next person. I think that's
I apologize. There was a delay on mine. It just kicked me out and brought me back in. Real quick, I think if we also look at the data that we have on our campuses that have food banks, and we look at the increasing number of how students and their families are using these resources, not only our students, our staff, it would be very compelling to say that our students, even though it's going up $204 and it's the skin in the game that they need, I think that if we're looking at increases, we need to do this we need to do this systematically and not just because our budget got cut this year, but with anticipation, because a lot of our students that are coming, they're working 2 and 3 jobs to be able to be at our institution. We have to look at that demographic as well. And so we have many students that are doing Pell and loans to be able to be at our institutions. So I think this increase is we need it at some point. Yes, we do. But at the same time, it needs to be done with anticipation and properly looking at the numbers so that our students can successfully be at our campuses.
Thank you, Bonnie. Colina and then Roberta.
Yeah, so as far as linking this to inflation, while there are 2 funding sources for the college, right? There's tuition and there's state funding. The interesting thing is that the state funding has not kept up with inflation. In fact, it's fallen far, far behind. So we would need to increase our block grant by about, let's say 50%, to get back to where we were, let's say in 2007. When you combine that with the cuts that were inflicted by the new fringe structure differences. So, it seems wrong to ask this of our students while the state refuses to hold up its end. Also, simultaneously at the BOR meeting previous to this one, we were told that there would be at least $85 million in cuts, over this biennium. So we are extracting value from the students and then charging them more. So, even what we're offering them isn't comparable to what we were offering last year or the year before that. So, I mean, that's something that you can offer to folks who push back on this a little, I think.
Kalina, is it fair to say that with the retirement incentives that contributes to what you're talking about, right? That we're going to have fewer full-time faculty and staff trying to serve students as we increase their tuition.
Assuming it's agreed to in some way, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Where are we? Roberta and then Seth.
Thank you. Another point, John, that one of our staff brought forward was the question about how this increase in tuition would impact those students that are full Pell, and what kind of impact that would have. Just making note of the fact that the $120 is half the cost of just a nursing textbook. And so, there was concern that financial aid full Pell would not cover the cost, but there's changes to Pell and no one really seems to know that exact answer. So that was one other area that somebody had a question about, just so that I'm being fully transparent.
Thank you. Yes. And Seth, we only have 6 minutes to vote on this. You are up.
Just two quick data points. So the data presented at the board was that 50% of students will be affected, right? Half of our students will not be affected, meaning they have full aid. Half of our students will be affected, meaning that this will affect them directly. And just the other statistics in terms of inflation, over the past 10 years, tuition has risen by 38%. So a 38% increase over the past 10 years, again, far above the rate of inflation. So we're tying tuition going up far above the rate of inflation, and our block grant not meeting inflation. So that's the reality that we're facing.
Thank you. All right, folks, can we vote? Are there any further hands? I'm not seeing any. Am I missing anyone?
Well, I was going to ask one quick, just a comment on this is that, I've had to let people go and not bring them back. And that was the entirety of the money that they were making that's, borne on individuals. And so I see like a tension between we need revenue in order to keep our institution open, but it also seems like it's very important for a lot of folks to send a statement that says we shouldn't be the ones to bear that burden, but it should be the state that comes through and provides adequate funding so that no one has to suffer. My only reflection on that is that if that doesn't happen, then that's back born again on the folks that we're going to have to continue to let go when we can't continue to employ them, right? And that's a difficult thing to do when you're the one telling folks, sorry, I'm not gonna see you next semester.
Yes, John, it is. That is the conundrum. But Kalina, can you, the opportunity that we have right now is trying to move the legislature, and that is the target of these actions. Am I misconstruing that or missing the main point here?
That's correct. I mean, the tuition increase has already been approved by the board. It stands. We are communicating to the legislature that we'd like them to put us in a position where we don't have to raise their $20 million on our students' backs while cutting the content of what we offer them. That's it.
Okay, folks, all those in favor of endorsing the FAC resolution, please raise your hands. All those in favor of endorsing the FAC resolution, please raise your hands. It would be really great if we could get unanimous support for this action. All those in favor? John, how many?
We're at 27.
We're at unanimous.
Thank you all for having me here.
The motion carries without objection or dissent. We have 2 minutes. I want to thank you all. Ooh, I am really tired. I want to thank you all for everything that you've done over the last year. We will have new and continuing work to do when we come together again in January. Please, please, please remember to get the Connecticut State Community College resolution before the governance bodies at your campuses. That is going to be punches 2 and 3 that we can also deliver to the legislature that supports the FAC. President Meduco, any parting words?
Absolutely not. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Bye, folks.
Happy holidays. Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
Al.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Bye,
Take
happy
care,
holidays,
everybody.
Merry Christmas, bye-bye, New Year.
Mike, can you stay on? No, I'll call you.